across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, good morning, Great Britain. It's me, Jonathan Gullis, and I'm delighted to be back here on the home of Common Sense with all of you to make sure that we get your views out and about across the stories of the day, and to make sure that those pesky politicians in Westminster know exactly what it is that you stand for. Well, guess how you do that? We want you to be calling in, WhatsApping in, voice noting in, whatever. But to do that, 0344 499 1000 is how you call us, how you WhatsApp us, and how you voice note us. 87222 is how you can text us with the word talk to the start of your message, and you can message and follow us on X at talkTV. Please don't be shy, make sure you get involved, because what a show we have packed for you today. From the opener yesterday, Labour announced plans to deny 4.5 million British people their right to vote, with two of Britain's biggest councils allowed to delay elections. Is this Labour denying democracy? The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has been furiously rebuked after the first channel migrants arrived at a new accommodation centre in the dead of night. And we've even had on Mr. Mark Dolan's morning show that some of those people have already made their trip down to London on the train. Do you support the use of military camps in order to, instead of hotels for illegal migrants? Does it work if we don't detain them? Let's see what you think. And then finally, Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday launched a blistering attack on European allies, insisting they like to talk, not act. The Ukraine leader took aim at the coalition of the willing, which includes the UK, for offering warm words instead of firm action against Vladimir Putin's Russia. Plenty to bring you as we go through. So make sure, as I say, 0344 499 1000 is how you call us, it's how you WhatsApp us, it's how you voice note us. 87222 is how you message us with the word talk at the start of your text, and message and follow us on X at talkTV. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be joined shortly by a friend of ours here on the show. His name is Mr. James Starkey. He is a former Home Office Special Advisor for the last Conservative government, and I think he's ready to join me down the line now. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Jonathan.
I didn't do enough practice this morning. I've already had a few tongue twisters that I've struggled to get around, so hopefully we'll improve as we go on. But listen, James, we start with the big story of today, which is that democracy is being denied, according to Conservative reform politicians, with this Labour government now denying elections for 4.5 million people, with 29 councils now having them cancelled for this year. The Labour government would use the word postpone, I must add, for in accordance for balance. Now, for some councils like Thurrock, this is the second year in a row. And for other councils like Norfolk and Suffolk, the controversy is the fact these are Conservative-led councils that have seek to delay their elections. So therefore, the attack cannot just be blamed solely at Labour's door. First of all, James, what's your view on this? Do you think it's an outrage that democracy is being denied?
Yeah, I do. I think, you know what, I was discussing this in a meeting the other day, and there were a couple of Labour people there, and they openly said, well, why would we have these elections? They'll probably just go reform. And I was genuinely shocked, because I think if the Conservatives or Reform had done this, you know, this amount of elections, you're not talking about one or two or three where, you know, maybe there's a genuine reason locally why there's a problem. You just, you know, they've written to tens of councils to say, would you like to delay the election? And a whole bunch of people who's, let's be honest, if they think they're going to lose, they have a vested interest in delaying them because they're going to lose their job. It's completely bonkers to me. And by the way, I think also it won't work. What are they hoping? That if they don't have an election in the next couple of months, that in a year people will forget about reform? It doesn't make any sense. So I think it's a really, really bad precedent. It's not a good thing to do. I don't think it's ever good to deny democracy. I mean, how much time do our own politicians spend lecturing countries around the world about their denial of democracy? And in the end, I don't think it's going to work for them anyway.
I mean, we have this, it is quite astonishing. I mean, in Stoke-on-Trent yesterday, James, the City Council were asked, would they guarantee the elections for May 2027. This is a Labour-led local authority to which they voted to not formally acknowledge that they would definitely have those elections go ahead. All they were asked was to simply write a letter to say that no matter what, elections must go ahead. And there's real confusion because local government reorganisation is the thing that's being blamed here when it comes to what the Labour government's using as their excuse. But if you look at Staffordshire, James, where I know you're from and I now have been imported to, I'm sure maybe some people want to export me from it, but hey, but all I can say is that in Staffordshire we have seen Labour-led Cannock Chase and Labour-led Tamworth delay their elections using the guise of local government reorganisation. But Newcastle Underline Borough Council, Conservative-led, at the same tier when it comes to local authorities, is actually going ahead with the elections. So how on earth can you have similar levels of council making two different arguments and having two different outcomes when it comes to elections? It just doesn't make sense, does it?
No, none of this makes sense. It's a combination of a fear of Labour in London, of the kind of leadership of Labour, of reform, and of trying to pacify angry councillors and saying, well, you can keep your job for another couple of years. That's not democracy. This is completely wrong. And it also, we've had, I think you'll know better than me, you know the kind of local election landscape better than I do, but it's not unheard of to have had delayed elections in the past. But the sheer scale is definitely unprecedented. And, like I said, I don't really think it's going to get them anywhere. I think you're just holding up a whole load of anger. And it's kind of a bad way to approach it, because if as a councillor you're not going to face election, is that really good for the running of a place? So I think these areas are going to suffer in a very, very real way, as well as the denial of democracy. But, the Labour won't be able to hide forever. They'll eventually have to face a general election. And I think, that's the kind of thing where people need to harness what they think, because, it's not a good thing.
Well, James, what I will say is I think it's fair to say you are someone who is still a Conservative Party supporter. The Reform UK has not been able to tempt you over just yet, although people like me will keep trying, my friend.
Well, but do you think it proves that you're perhaps not as convincing as you think you are?
Oh, well, let's just find out this, because on the one hand, I'm told by the Conservative Party, it's outrageous for this denial of democracy, yet Conservative-led Norfolk, Conservative-led Suffolk, and even we're still unclear on what Conservative-led Essex County Council is choosing to do. But we know definitely, as I say, those two, Norfolk and Suffolk, Conservative-led, are having their elections today. Kemi Badenoch saying it's not right, but then refuses to rebuke her own councillors who have sought to delay their elections. Should the Conservative Party take action against Conservative councillors who are denying democracy?
No, I think that I spoke to someone from CCHQ when this was first, Conservative Central Office, that is, sorry, when this was kind of first knocking around. I have sympathy with the way that they've approached this. Labour have sought purposely to kind of divide and rule, if you like. They've written to the councils directly, who, in the cases you listed, are run by the Conservatives. I mean, the question is, why, if you want to kind of be consistent, then why is your party and your leader allowing reform councils around the country to put taxes up when they said they wouldn't? Should they step in and stop them?
Oh, James, you've had your Weetabix this morning. I can see here that we're dodging the question like a politician. You're a straight shooter, James. Come on. The Conservatives should not be delaying elections.
If you don't want to dodge the question, you just ask the question I've just asked.
Well, I've asked you, James, unfortunately for you, I'm the interviewer, and I'm asking you clearly, should Conservative councillors be denying elections? Should Kemi Badenoch take action against those councillors?
So, to be clear, I don't think they should be doing it, but I don't think Kemi should take action because it would just cause too many problems in the party. So now you answer my question. Should your leadership of Reform step in and stop reform councils who promise people to cut taxes? Should they step in and make them cut taxes?
Well, as you know, James, authorities like Staffordshire, now Reform UK-led, have had to deal with huge increase in pressures and prices, particularly because of Labour's jobs tax and national insurance hike on employers when it comes to adult and children's social care, which has made the services even more expensive, and of course have also come into a situation where the Chancellor herself in her budget has forced councils, based on her own financial mapping, to find ways of raising council tax up to 5%. But what I will say, James, is that in Conservative-led Staffordshire, for consistently we're putting it up by 4.99%. In Reform UK-led Staffordshire, it's now 3.99 with millions of pounds in savings. So we're seeing progress in the way that was promised to the voters. But listen, James, I'm sure you and I can go back and forth, but there's one thing we will agree on, which is we are both super excited for this by-election in Gaunton and Denton, because blimey, has Andrew Gwynn put the cat amongst the pigeons? We keep hearing about Andy Burnham is considering going for the seat. This would be potentially seen as a challenge to the leadership of Sir Keir Starmer. We keep then hearing the National Executive Committee that has inserted a rule just before this by-election that any mayor that's elected must seek permission from the National Executive Committee to be able to stand, and with lots of them off the record saying Andy Burnham has zero chance on being able to stand. In fact, some even muting, they might even just put up an all-women shortlist in order to deliberately block Burnham being able to stand. I mean, James, the political Westminster drama for Keir Starmer doesn't end. He had Donald Trump and Greenland to deal with. Then the next day, after that dies down, he's now got this by-election, which looks like a three-way fight based on MRP polling between Labour, Reform UK and the Greens. What do you make of it?
It's a total mess for Starmer. I mean, it's the last thing he would have needed. I mean, at the moment, they're kind of staggering from one week to the next, hoping something else would happen. I know this was discussed on talk last week. Kind of the only reason that Labour had a half-decent day is because the Tories had a defection to Reform. It was absolutely nothing to do with him. And that was the one day he seemed willing to go on the media that week. So I think, they've had the Greenland issue, which seems to have been solved. Very interestingly to me, despite Starmer pushing, he's some kind of Trump whisperer, it's the one time he stayed away from meeting Donald Trump. He didn't go to Davos. His chancellor, and I think maybe his business secretary went, that the deal was made. So it seems like when Starmer's not there, things maybe go better. Maybe if we could get him out of the country for a couple of weeks, we get some economic growth. But on the kind of Burnham stuff, I think it's a nightmare for them. I've spoken to some friends in Labour last night. They said that immediately that the kind of Downing Street briefing was they are going to block him. That's not official, but it's what people close to Starmer are privately telling kind of journalists and Labour MPs. So the mood music, again, this morning, they've mounted an operation where clearly allies of Starmer are getting people on the airwaves to say, well, if Burnham run, this will cost a lot of money to have a new campaign for Greater Manchester Mayor. We shouldn't do this. So they're trying to kind of push him away. They basically don't want to have to make the decision to block him. But I think it's going to. It looks like they will block him. To me, that's where the direction is having, and I think maybe that's helpful. It's just another thing that makes Starmer look very weak. He can't allow one guy to run for an MP because he might not be leader in a few months. That is not a great place to be if you're Prime Minister.
It's a weird place, isn't it, James? Because if Andy Burnham's blocked, how does that ripple effect through the Labour Parliamentary Party, which we know is already quite divided? And Andy Burnham has certainly been doing the rounds amongst Labour MPs, helping raise funds and clearly courting their attention. It also could see Labour councillors and even more members defect or just leave the party altogether. At the other end, you let Andy Burnham run and Andy Burnham wins. You've let the fox into the hen house, and all we're ever going to hear is when is Andy Burnham going to challenge Sir Keir Starmer. There's obviously, James, as well, the fact this Green thing, we know that from the Caerphilly by-election that Plaid were very good at sucking up the progressive left vote, off Labour, off Greens, off Liberal Democrats to stop Reform UK. There's a big debate going on about if Burnham runs, is he the best hope of having that kind of effect where Green Party members, and Zach Polanski as leader of the Green Party has already said he would be willing to work with the Burnham-led Labour Party. Would he be therefore the best chance to stop Reform UK from winning? Or if it's a Keir Starmer appointed candidate that's not Andy Burnham, the Greens only polling roughly 4% behind in these MRPs, so they'll go, we're here, as they keep saying, to replace the Labour Party. Therefore, we're not going to ask voters to lend votes. We're going to suck up Labour votes instead, and it'll be us who can block Reform UK. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens with tactical voting.
Well, your point on a candidate is interesting. And another Labour friend I was talking to last night. So Burnham will have the backings of the unions. And the unions, I don't know if they said it on the record, they've definitely been saying it's outrageous if he gets blocked. So that's another problem for Starmer. We know how important unions are to the Labour Party. And so they're going to be furious. We've also seen this morning an MP called Joe White, who might not be super familiar to listeners and viewers, but is a Labour MP who is leader of their Red Wall. kind of coalition of MPs. And she has kind of subtly, or not so subtly, tweeted that it should be a decision for people in the area, i.e., Burnham should be allowed to run if he wants to. So, to your point, they're going to have to get a very, very legitimate looking candidate if it's not Andy Burnham. So my friend said to me, watch out for a union member local nurse popping up as a candidate as a sign that they're going to stop Burnham, because they're going to need a really strong, and you've seen this before in the Conservative Party, and I imagine it will happen in Reform as well, Jonathan. In those tricky elections, if you don't have someone local, it can really backfire. So they really can't, they really do need, if you're going to deny Andy Burnham, the Manchester mayor, and say, well, he can't run, you're going to have a candidate that at least looks half decent on paper, not for the entire thing to look like a sham.
I think the other thing we're quite intrigued on, James, is that if Andy Burnham does run, what does that mean for the Greater Manchester mayoralty? For listeners' sake, because Andy Burnham has police crime commissioner powers, he would have to, by law, resign as the mayor of Greater Manchester. And if you look at the strategy Reform UK are discussing about the donut effect that Boris Johnson successfully deployed when he became the mayor of London, Reform UK will be looking at the donut of Greater Manchester and thinking maybe they can replicate something similar. And even if they didn't win the parliamentary by-election, blimey, that mayor in Manchester, in Greater Manchester, that's a huge prize, is it not?
Oh yeah, I mean, and also let's not forget what do Reform, Nigel Farage want to show? They want to continually show momentum. So even if they were not to win the Greater Manchester mayoralty, if they were to manage to come second, that kind of shows, hey, maybe we didn't win this one. It's a Labour seat. It's been held. They've had a relatively successful mayor before. We're the guys that can challenge them. We're the party of the right, which is what Reform will push. So yeah, it would be and also these events are good to fundraise, to generate morale. I think for Reform in particular, you need to kind of test out your systems, your canvassers. Does it all work? Can you get people into the right areas at the right time? Good kind of training ground, if you like, if nothing else. But for Starmer, it's just a total nightmare. It's just a complete nightmare. If he blocks Burnham, he's now got the unions angry at him. He's clearly got a bunch of Burnham supporting backbenchers. I mean, the other interesting thing, that another Labour person said to me is, if he blocks Burnham, does that really solidify Wes Streeting's position as a challenger? Because if Burnham supporting MPs won't really have anywhere to go, but the Wes Streeting acolytes will say, look, this is why we need change. This guy's too weak. Come join us. Basically,
James, we've at least got 2 months of more Labour infighting and chaos. And James, I know you understand the polling world. You've got a background in polling. Professor Sir John Curtis, there we go, finally got it out, who is someone I dare to go up against, but I'm going to try and disagree with him. He suggested that he thinks Reform UK has peaked at around that 32% mark in September 2025, and obviously highlights the fact that there's now a lot of talk about Reform UK support plateauing around the 28-29% if you take the averaging of polls. And he says that comes at the same time that you've had Nigel Farage obviously in the headlines for what happened when he was at Dulwich College. You've then got Kemi Badenoch sort of seemingly to be resurgent in some ways, the Badenoch bounce that others are talking about, and maybe raising the Conservative Party to 19%. I mean, what's interesting here, is it not, James, is one, do you think Reform have plateaued, or do you think it's too early to have that discussion? But also, does it show that there is going to have to be more and more pressure applied to both Reform and Conservative, potentially the Jacob Rees-Mogg idea, which I disagree with, to unite the right ahead of a general election? Just to add, James, Sir John Curtis does add that he thinks that Reform UK is going to have a scene because obviously people who might have voted Remain in the Brexit referendum are simply just going to not find it stomachable to vote for Reform, especially as Brexit has in many polls become more unpopular, whereas in the Conservatives has a slightly softer edge maybe to it on that.
Yeah, thank you for the last bit. So the point I was going to make is, it's interesting when people talk about a ceiling for Reform. I'm like, well, what's your premise for that? So it's interesting to hear Professor Curtis's premise is they can't kind of get beyond the Leave vote. Look, maybe that's true. I'm not quite so sure. I think we heard actually yesterday Keir Starmer say that what's going on in America with Donald Trump might mean a pivot to, well, will mean a pivot to a stronger relationship with the EU. There's different views of that in the Labour Party. I think some just want to strengthen the trade deal, which you would have people who voted Brexit who would agree with that, who would say, well, they've not got anything wrong with the trade side of things. But I think if Starmer pursues that, maybe you'll get that polarization back, the kind of real clear dividing line. It'll be hard to separate Farage from a kind of anti-EU perspective. And so if Starmer goes full on towards the EU, maybe that'll bring that up again. But the thing that I would kind of point people to say I'm not so sure is the 2019 election. So in 2019, Boris, and this of course was the Conservatives, but the Conservatives, and Boris Johnson in particular, was very associated with the Leave campaign. And so was a lot of people that were around him at the time, the kind of significant cabinet members like my old boss. Two of my old bosses, Priti Patel and Michael Gove, both supported Leave. Now, what you had there is Boris said, let's get Brexit done, i.e., it doesn't matter which way you go, you just want to sort this stuff out, that the country is a mess. Well, you tell me if you can find anyone who doesn't think the country's in a mess at the moment. I don't think you can. So I think Farage hasn't massively campaigned on the EU issues. He kind of leaves it alone. I think he doesn't really want to get into it. Mentions it every now and again just so he can cover the topic. But I'm not sure I totally agree with that. Do I think he could win the hardcore Remainers? Are Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart going to come out and back Nigel Farage at the next election? I would remain sceptical of that. Maybe if they sponsor one of their podcasts, who knows? But I think, can you win some people who are frustrated by other things? Whether that be immigration or just the general feeling of a broken Britain, which has been a kind of topic that former Conservative, One Nationer, Remainer, maybe they could send Rob Jenrick out. He was a big Remainer, so they could maybe get him to go and appeal to the old Remainers.
Oh, James, that's naughty. That's a naughty little swipe at the end there, but we love it here on the home of Common Sense. That is talk. I totally disagree with you, James. Obviously, I know Rob well, and I got to work with him in Parliament. And I think Robert Jenrick is sincere on his beliefs and where he's got to on his political journey. And I'm delighted that he's part of the Reform UK family. But I do acknowledge that, yes, Rob did vote Remain, James. But, so did my wife, and I married her. So, this is great news indeed. We can bring everyone together at the end of the day.
Not good news for Rob. If you Rob's now worried you're going to try and marry him.
I'll spare Robert Jenrick the thought of me getting down on bended knee anytime soon. I can assure him of that. But look, thank you, James Starkey there, former Home Office Special Advisor to Priti Patel. Delighted to have you on the show. Well, you know what to do. What do you think about Andy Burnham running for become a member of Parliament again? Would you like to see him lead the Labour Party? Would he make you consider voting Labour again if he were to lead the Labour Party? What do you think about the fact that John Curtis has said that Reform UK has peaked in the polls? And do you think that Labour are traitors for denying democracy and that Kemi Badenoch should be called out for her hypocrisy for not rebuking her councillors who too have followed the Labour line and made sure they've denied democracy in Norfolk, Suffolk and, who knows, in Essex? 0344 499 1000 is how you call, WhatsApp and voice note. 87222 is how you text the word talk at the start of your message. And of course, you can also follow and message us on X at talkTV. A few texts come in. Nigel's texted in saying, great show, Jonathan. Thank you very much. This country needs a government that listens. The only way to do this is under our current system is the ballot box. To deny the voting population, this is suicide for any political party. People need to vote in their masses when they are allowed to. And fingers crossed elections in Scotland and Wales will give results that will see Starmer lose his job. Labour to collapse from within and the polls for reform appear to grow. There we go. Another one texts in here as well. Nicola from Norfolk. Jonathan, the leader of Norfolk County Council is completely duplicitous, telling the electorate she had no intention of requesting a delay in the elections whilst at the same time lobbying for a delay in private. She underestimates the anger of voters if she thinks they won't remember this anti-democratic move when we can eventually vote. And that is Nicola from Norfolk. Well, after the break, we'll be talking about Shabana Mahmood and her big push on immigration. Do you support the use of ex-military bases when it comes to detaining illegal migrants? We'll see you after the break.
Would Donald Trump find it easier to deal with Britain if we had Prime Minister Nigel Farage?
We are not going to determine for the people of the UK who they choose as their leaders. That's the antithesis of Brexit. It's the antithesis of MAGA. But of course, I know Nigel very well. Nigel has a very close, friendly relationship to the President of the United States, the most powerful man in the world. I can't predict what the Brits will do, but when you have a friendly, it's like me in this position now. My friends are cabinet members.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Great Britain. Me, Jonathan Gullis. What a start to the show. That was start to the show. Blimey. I need to really practice my tongue twisters this morning. No good lecturing my daughter about it when I can't do it myself, eh? Right. Listen here, everyone. Let's start again. Good morning, Great Britain. It's great to have you here on the show. I'm delighted to be sitting in, as always, for the amazing team we have here at Talk. And what a show we've had so far. Mr. James Starkey covering the political stories of the day. But I want to hear from you before we go to our next guest of what you think when it comes to Shabana Mahmood sneaking in the dead of night 27 adult male illegal migrants into Crowborough training camp in East Sussex. Do you feel comfortable about it, yes or no? Would you be willing to see military camps used as long as these people were actually detained there rather than being allowed to roam freely during the daytime? 0344 499 1000 is how you call us, it's how you WhatsApp us, it's how you voice note us. And I love a voice note. 87222 is how you text us the word talk at the start of your message. And you can also message us and follow us on X at talkTV. We go to the former head of UK Border Force. His name is Mr. Tony Smith and he joins me down the line. Hello, Tony. How are you?
Hi, Jonathan. All good, thank you.
I'm delighted to have you on the show. Now, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has been furiously rebuked after the first Channel migrants arrived at a new accommodation centre in the dead of night. The Home Office said 27 illegal migrants were taken to ex-military barracks at Crowborough, East Sussex on Thursday, with the first arriving under police escort at 3:30 in the morning. I mean, Tony, use of military bases, will this be a deterrent?
Good question. We'll have to wait and see. I think the idea, as you say, is to get them out of hotels. Hotels is seen by this government as a pull factor. Put them in these military camps, probably aren't quite as salubrious as hotels or some of the hotels. They're more barrack-style accommodation. But as you said, Jonathan, they're not detention centres. They're basically open. People will have to sign in and out, I understand, if they want to leave, but they are free to go around. So I think the real worry for the government is going to be the community tensions. Wherever you place undocumented migrants in the country, those neighbours living nearby are going to be concerned about it, and particularly where we see cases regularly reported of migrants who do stay in these places actually going on to commit criminal acts in the community. That's a real worry, and so I suspect the community tensions there will be very high. And of course, the Home Secretary is saying that this is just the first of many other military establishments she's looking at, to get into the minds of the migrants in Calais, is this going to stop them coming across? I'm not sure it will, actually. I would pivot directly to the next boat and put them in there. I'm not sure they're going to do that. I think they'll decamp from hotels first. But even then, 3 months, Jonathan, to deal with an asylum application, 54-month delay in appeals already as it is. I'm not sure 3 months will be long enough. And removals at the end of the day is the name of the game, as you know. And we've only removed, I think, about 5% of those that have ever arrived on a small boat. So I think the incentive is still there for them to come across on the grounds that, well, wherever they stay, they won't be there for that long. And, will be looked after. And at the end of the day, they'll probably be allowed to stay.
Well, this is the issue, isn't it, Tony? Because, I mean, the fact is that we've seen actually hotel use go up by 13% to the end of September last year under this Labour government. That means 36,273 people are currently in hotels. Now, this site is going to take a maximum of 500. That is not going to make any significant dent into that 36,000 figure. And as you say rightly as well, if you've got the ability to wander into the local town of Crowborough, which has a population of 21,000, so it's not exactly a massive town at the end of the day, but if you've got the ability to pop into the local town, or indeed as some people have called into the Mark Dolan show this morning, claiming they've already been seen at the train station heading in for a day trip into London. That doesn't exactly scream of squalor. It doesn't exactly scream of someone who's going to be struggling to, or is going to think twice about coming over. They're still going to go, it's a pretty good deal, isn't it, still at the end of the day? Yeah, OK, it's not as nice as a hotel, but it's still a warm bed. It's still a roof over my head. It's still 3 meals a day. It's still a little bit of pocket change, and it's still including the odd day trip into London, where God knows, as you rightly say, what they'll be doing. We've seen already reports from The Sun in the past of mass shoplifting from illegal migrants. We know there'll be people working in the black market for delivery companies even when it comes to food deliveries. And of course, we've seen too many tragic stories of illegal migrants having raped or sexually assaulted young women and children in this country. The truth of the matter is, isn't it, Tony, that as you rightly say, until we detain and deport, that pull factor to the UK is not going to be met.
Yeah, Jonathan, so there is legislation to deny people coming from France from the asylum system, from the UK asylum system already. In law, we do that for the one-to-one scheme. You know, the Conservatives were going to do that for the Rwanda scheme. But the current policy, unless you're selected for that, which is a very, very small number, then you are admitted into the UK asylum system. Then, of course, your other weapon in your armoury is to claim human rights protection, where you are allowed to claim that, but at any time there's no debate. So you've got these avenues, these legal avenues open to you that the smugglers know well about, as do the migrants. If they can get within the jurisdiction, they can use those rights, and that is very, very difficult to turn those cases around very quickly once they're in the system. So I would advocate a system, first and foremost, like the last government tried to do with Rwanda, to say, look, if you're coming from a small boat from France, you're not in immediate fear of persecution. You could and should have claimed asylum, and many did, and therefore you're not going to be allowed to claim protection in this country, and then set up some form of a removal deterrent and detain them while you do that. That hasn't really changed very much. So it will be better for them than the jungles they're staying in Calais, and the camps in Calais, in these barracks. So I'm afraid I'm not convinced that this is going to work. And my other problem, John, just to get this off my chest, I'm really worried about screening and vetting. I mean, I did a lot of that in my time in the department. We saw an HMRC report last year that 24 hours at Manston is not long enough, Jonathan. You can take fingerprints and photographs, you can do checks, that will check against UK systems, but quite a lot of these people, these cases we see reported are into mischief abroad, overseas. That takes a lot longer to investigate. We've got good debriefers down there at Manston, but they're not given enough time. 24 hours is not long enough. We need to keep them down there for at least a week, Jonathan, at least a week, if nothing else, but to make sure we thoroughly screen them, vet them, they fully understand the laws of this country and what happens if they breach those laws. All of that stuff, it really worries me as well.
Well, Tony, I tell you what, I hope you're ready to come out of retirement. We need you back there in the border force with that sound logic. I mean, Tony, because your point's actually really important about Manston, because on top of that, the Sun's reporting that the Home Office has now closed the Western Jetfoil, which is the small boat processing site in Dover, due to the need for essential maintenance, and could be shut for up to 2 months. That's going to cause some more logistical headaches, is it not? That's where people, I think, initially have a health check, safeguarding triage, early age decisions are made there. I'm sure lots of blokes claiming they're 16, 17 years old, and obviously will maybe get warm clothing, etc. They're going to have to now get those people, maybe use minibuses or indeed coaches. That's going to come at further cost to the taxpayer and put further strain on sites like Manston as well when it comes to capacity. The fact is, on the 14th of January, 171 people came over. On the 17th of January, 317 people came over. And the 19th of January, 275 people came over. You know, these are illegal migrants still coming in dead of winter when we know the weather is not good. And like you say, if people are willing to risk their lives in these conditions with the waters at those temperatures, being told that you're going to get out of some shabby tent in the jungle in Calais, as they're self-described, into a military barracks with a bed, with a wardrobe, with heating, with meals provided, with clothing and a bit of pocket change, it's going to be a much better deal than what you're getting in France, right?
Yeah, I did a little bit of work with the last government, Jonathan, on the small boats, particularly down in the reception arrangements in Western Jetful and at Manston, where I went down, had a look at all that, went out in the boats. Western Jetful, I mean, that's the replacement. Tughaven was awful. I don't know if you remember Tughaven. That was just a marquee because the government just simply, that was just tents in the mud, basically, because the government thought they're not going to invest because the boats are going to stop. Of course, the boats didn't stop, so they had to build Western Jetful. It's still mainly a series of porter cabins. I don't think the Port of Dover are over delighted that it's there because they got other plans for the Port of Dover. Ramsgate is a derelict port these days. I've been there as well, and so these are all sort of semi-temporary porter cabin type arrangements, literally to get them out of wet clothes, to do a very, very quick check on, you know, age, health, and then onto coaches and up to Manston. So it's still a very, very temporary process. I would do a lot more with Manston, Jonathan, personally. I've been there. It's a huge site. The Home Office own it. I'd have my border force headquarters down there. I'd have detention centres there. I'd have fast track screening centres there, and I'd fly people straight out of Manston if I possibly could. And then you want to try and get people removed very, very quickly to get a real deterrent. Once they're into the country, through that 24-hour screen at Manston, and whether it's a hotel or a barracks, I'm afraid they know full well it's very, very unlikely they're ever going to be sent back. It's just really a waiting game until they get their permission to stay in the country.
Tony Smith, former head of UK Border Force, thank you so much for joining us here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. After the break, we'll be joined by Lord Dunnett, former head of the British Army, talking all things about global security. We'll see you soon. Good morning, Great Britain. It's me, Jonathan Gullis, here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. And what a show we've been having so far with you. 0344 499 1000 is how you call us. It's how you WhatsApp us. And it's how you voice note us. 87222 is how you text us the word Talk, the starting message. And of course, you can message and follow us on X at talkTV. What do you think about Shabana Mahmood using these military barracks? What do you think about Andy Burnham potentially coming back to Parliament? What do you think about Sir Keir Starmer and his Labour Party cancelling elections for 4.5 million people? We want to hear from you. But we now go on to very serious affairs, global security, that's very important in our national interest. And I'm delighted to be joined by Lord Dunnett, the former head of the British Army, who joins us down the line. Lord Dunnett, thank you so much for joining us this morning. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. And Jonathan, very happy to join you and your viewers and listeners.
Well, thank you so much indeed. Now, Lord Dunnett, I'll start with something that has rightly and understandably angered a lot of people in this country. And it is, I think, the disgraceful comments from President Trump, where he has said that NATO allies, including the United Kingdom, were sort of hanging back. They weren't on the front line when it came to the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the reason that angers me, Lord Dunnett, and I wasn't anyone brave enough to be on the front line like yourself or many others, was that I remember the pain the town of Stratford-upon-Avon felt, where I grew up, when a boy that I knew, not well, but still knew, would see regularly out and about, Private Conrad Lewis, tragically lost his life in Afghanistan. We all remember the 450 plus brave servicemen and women whose bodies were tragically brought back in those coffins draped in our Union flag. And for President Trump to suggest that somehow we weren't putting our men and women on the front line is a grave insult, is it not, to the British people and, of course, our amazing armed forces?
Jonathan, you're absolutely right. I mean, I couldn't believe when I heard this report yesterday that the man could be frankly so stupid and so outrageous as to make those comments. I understand that many advisers on the British side who heard about this before he uttered those words endeavoured to persuade his advisers for him not to say these things because it's manifestly not true. And as you said, we lost 457 of our own young people fighting a very gritty campaign up until 2014. I was talking with my own middle son just about an hour ago, who did a tour in Afghanistan as well as previously in Iraq. And he says, actually, Dad, the man's completely mad. I mean, I think the only explanation I can offer is that this tumultuous week that started with his land grab of Greenland and finished up with him achieving rather less than he wanted, albeit the issues around the high north are important. He decided to chuck a few hand grenades in order to divert attention from his less than successful week as far as Greenland is concerned. But his comments fly in the face of history. Back in 2006, it was we, the British, who took the lead on behalf of NATO in starting the new operation in southern Afghanistan, and did that fantastic job in a very difficult set of circumstances. And the other thing which he's forgotten is that when the US forces and remaining NATO forces left Afghanistan in August 2021, this was a result of the deal that he, Donald Trump, did with the Taliban towards the end of his first term as president. And frankly, it was quite unnecessary to do that because the 2,500–3,000 international troops that were still in Afghanistan were helping the Afghan National Security Forces contain the Taliban while Afghan civil society continued to flourish. How come there were 300 female judges in Afghanistan then? Because we'd helped them transform their society. And all that was swept away through Trump's stupidity. And now he has got the disrespect and the outrageous choice of words to say that we hung back from the front line. My God, we were certainly on the front line, as 457 young people died will testify, and 2 or 3 times that number seriously injured, either physically or mentally.
I thought we saw a very good thing in British politics where we saw from across the political divide a unity when it came to standing up for Greenland's sovereignty and obviously that of Norway too. And the Prime Minister holding a very firm line when it came to what was happening when it came to his position on Greenland. Do you think it would be appropriate for the Prime Minister to publicly demand an apology from President Trump for those very appalling words and the insults, as they say, and you rightly have pointed out, that has been done particularly to those families that have to live with the pain of losing a loved one who died in the service of king and country?
I think it would be entirely proper for the Prime Minister to ask for an apology. Whether he will get it or not, I don't know. It shouldn't become one of those issues that wrecks the relationship between the UK and the United States. I think we all know that the remarks are so outrageous and so wrong that, frankly, we should make our point demanding an apology, but I wouldn't let it become a cause célèbre and a cause of rupture. Because Keir Starmer, whether you approve of him or not, I think he has played quite a clever game in trying to maintain a good relationship between himself and Donald Trump, between the United Kingdom and the United States. And this issue is such a palpably wrong and stupid one that, frankly, it shouldn't be the cause of a rupture.
Totally agree with you, Lord Dunnett. If I may, Lord Dunnett, we've also had a very angry Volodymyr Zelensky, President Zelensky, obviously, of Ukraine, at Davos, where he has said that he's getting quite tired of what he feels are words of support, but very little actual action then backed up when it comes to holding Russia to account. He references about Russian oil tankers. He also references about money that's been got but not necessarily funneled towards Ukraine to help with the frontline efforts. I think Europe's holding around £210 billion in Russian assets that have been seized, and this Russian shadow fleet that I think we did see some military action against recently. Do you think Volodymyr Zelensky is right to make these comments? Do you think that it has been a lot of talking now, but actually there needs to be some decisions, especially regardless of what the US is doing? Because I think Zelensky stresses that it all seems to just be waiting to see if President Trump will actually ever make a decision on what to do. And he seems to be trying to put the pressure on Europe to maybe you have to force that hand a bit harder.
Yes, I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy and admiration for President Zelensky at various different levels. I think we all recognise, we all Europeans recognise, that Ukraine is very much the front line of holding further Russian aggression at bay, but they are doing it at a terrible human cost to themselves. Now, we have voiced a lot of support for Ukraine. We've given a lot of equipment, a lot of support, provided a lot of training. But at the end of the day, there is still much more that could be done to help Ukraine be in the strongest position. And we're getting quite near crunch time now. Talks are occurring in the next 24 hours involving Russians, Americans and Ukrainians about the possibility of some kind of ceasefire leading to some kind of peace agreement. There are big sticking issues still on the ownership of Donbass, and completely understand how that should be. But I can understand why Zelensky keeps the pressure on European partners to say, come on, you do everything you possibly can to help us, because actually we're helping you. And you make reference to the shadow oil fleets and so on and so forth. If we were really serious about tightening the screw on the Russian economy, then there are many ways that could be taken further to screw the pressure tighter, particularly on the flow of oil and gas from Russia, which is still finding its way into an international market of some sort. And it's the income from that which enables Putin to continue to pay for his war. Meanwhile, Russian interest rates are quite high, inflation is quite high. I think many of the Russian civilians are beginning to feel the pressure. But if we could tighten the screw even more, then I think the degree of feeling of unpopularity of the war, and maybe by extension the unpopularity of Putin, might grow. And all that will help European security, and of course would help most particularly the Ukrainians.
And then final one from me, Lord Zanet. We've seen also at Davos, Jared Kushner, son-in-law to President Trump, come up with these, well, they look impressive on paper, this presentation of a new Gaza with coastal seaside resorts essentially and ports and everything else. All sounds very nice in theory. It does seem to miss some of the very serious questions that are still laying around. For example, who's going to fund it? What's the governance going to be of such a region? How do you get Hamas to disarm? Is it a Northern Irish process, which means it's slow? And how do you make sure that, for example, Iran doesn't continue to be a major influence? And then, of course, what you actually do with the population of Gaza. Are they the ones entitled to the new housing, etc.? You know, so... a nice slideshow presentation. I'm sure it made everyone feel better about themselves in some sense, but doesn't really still leave a long-term settlement when it comes to what happens between Israel and Gaza.
Well, the reality is that in Gaza there is a fragile ceasefire at the present moment. Hamas has not disarmed. Hamas is still very much there. We've seen that on television as and when there have been prisoner exchanges. Men dressed in black carrying weapons are very much there. So what we have currently is a fragile ceasefire. But you know, you're absolutely right to ask the question about the people that live in Gaza, the Palestinians, and not just the Palestinians in Gaza, but the Palestinians on the West Bank. They must be a major player, or major players in whatever the future of that part of the Middle East is going to be. Those people have a right to be there, and they have a right not to be treated as objects, but to be treated as part of the discussion. What do they want for Gaza? What do they want for the West Bank? What right do the Palestinians have to have a state of their own? You know, the so-called two-state solution has been bandied around for years and years. Is it ever going to happen? Or are we all going to fall victim to the greater Israel that Netanyahu and the more radical Israelis would like to see, squeezing out the Palestinians completely? History is on the side of the Palestinians, as it is also on the side of Israel. And the only fair solution is a two-state solution, if that can be worked out. And what happens to Gaza is a critical part of all that.
Lord Dunnett, former head of the British Army, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts. Well, what do you think of what President Trump said about British troops not being on the front line in Afghanistan and Iraq? Should he be made to formally apologise? What do you think about this Gaza peace plan and actually Russia being invited to be part of the peace board? What do you think about Volodymyr Zelensky, President Zelensky of Ukraine, saying enough is enough, Europe? Stop doing just talking, start acting, whether or not that's with the USA. 0344 499 1000 is how you can WhatsApp us, how you can call us, how you can voice note us. 87222 is how you can text us the word talk at the start of your message, and message and follow us on X at talkTV. I'll see you after the break.
didn't vote on it last night, mate.
No, in Parliament there's something called being slipped, which is where you pre-agree with the whips that you got something else and you can't do it. The last Conservative government took a very long time to pass a bill which granted a degree of immunity to the brave men who fought in the period of the Troubles, so they didn't have to spend the last days of their lives being hauled through the courts or waiting for a letter to drop on their doormat, telling them that they were now in danger. And the Labour government, for reasons I think none of us can fathom, have decided to unwind that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Me, Jonathan Gullis, here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. What a show we have in line for you so far. Let's go to a couple of voice notes we've got queued up first of all. One is from Kevin, who wants to talk about Crowborough being used as the Crowborough military barracks being used to house illegal migrants.
Mahmood has no idea what to do. She's gaslighting us. She's fake. She comes up with all these speeches, going to do this, stop this, and all the rest of it. She has no intention of doing nothing. She's just moving these people in now next to these great people in these villages. It's a disgrace. To bring them in by the dead of night tells you everything you need to know. I'm afraid this whole government are trying to hoodwink us people. We're not stupid. We can read straight through them.
Well, an unconvinced listener there. Let's see if Kitty maybe has a different perspective also on Crowborough barracks being used to house illegal migrants.
Home Secretary is a disgrace. Commentators like to say she's really tough. She isn't. She solved the prison crisis by allowing tens of thousands of hardened criminals back onto our streets, which is like me saying, I'm going to solve my debt by doing armed robbery. Putting the immigrants into that military base in the middle of the night, they are trying to provoke the hard-working public. I have no doubt that is what Starmer tried to do in Southport by labelling everybody far right, when in fact they were just right. And that's what she's doing. We are heading towards, I don't know what, but I don't think it's going to be good. I certainly hope it isn't good for this government. They need to go.
Very interesting scepticism there of Shabana Mahmood, who, as you rightly say, Kitty, was indeed the Justice Secretary that saw thousands of prisoners released early, many of whom did go on to commit other crimes or be recalled to prison, and certainly not made our streets safer. We hear a lot of chatter amongst the media Westminster classes that she's tough talking. We're yet to actually see that come out in action. Tony in Lancashire, another caller for us. Hello, Tony, how are you?
I'm all right, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much, my friend. What do you got to say about this Labour government?
Well, what I want to say was, since they've got in, their primary objective just seems to be to keep their bums in the seats and keep their jobs. I was thinking, if doing the job of government, you come in with your policies, your wages should be performance-related, so that if you're not hitting them key things that you've come in on, that you've promised to do, then your wages go out the window, because all they seem to be doing is pacifying the majority of the voters, who now seems to be the Muslim vote. How is it about you do the things that you've got elected on and maybe win over some actual real Brits?
Well, a strong comment there in Tony. What do you think you expect to see, though, going forward? How do we fix this problem?
I don't think we can with the current government, because I think he's so wet. He's so... And I voted Labour. I will never vote Labour again. I've always voted Labour.
Oh, fascinating. You were a Labour voter.
Again. Yeah, never again. It really, really winds me up, the fact that I helped put them in there. And it's just been such a poor show. And it was only on the back of, like most people, that the Tories had made such a mess, and there wasn't much of an alternative, really. You just thought, you can't be worse than what Sunak's doing. Clearly you can.
Well, thank you very much, Tony, there. Strong comments to hear from a former Labour voter no longer backing Labour. Tony Lancashire, thank you for your call. Let's go to some of the texts that we've had come in. President Trump is not insulting our troops. He's insulting the woke leadership in Britain and Europe when it comes to war, and the British Army and other European NATO countries were told to not engage and not to fire back because of woke protocols, but the Danes and Americans were able to fire back because they refused to be controlled by the woke protocols, and Lord Dunnett would admit to this if it wasn't for his TDS. Stuart Brown there, so strong comments in support of President Trump. I certainly didn't expect to see that. However, Mick has texted in, Trump has lost my respect after his ignorant comments about our troops. He must apologise immediately or be shunned by all NATO leaders when he wants to use our bases. I now believe he is a lunatic with control of the toy box. So again, reacting strong comments there to President Trump making those dreadful comments about our British troops, 457 who died in Afghanistan and Iraq, apparently being hanging back rather than being on the front line. Well, ladies and gentlemen, 0344 499 1000 is how you get in touch with us via call, voice note or WhatsApp. 87222 is how you text us with the word talk at the start of your message, as well as message and follow us on X at talkTV. After the break, James Mathewson is joining us to review the day's political stories. Don't miss out on that. I'm sure many of you look forward to hearing what James has to say and be wound up by it, but that means we want you to call in and text in so you can tell James what you really think. We look forward to seeing you after the break. Go and get yourself a brew, maybe go and treat yourself to a little bacon sarnie, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, Great Britain. It's me, Jonathan Gullis, here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk, and I'm delighted that you are joining us. So make sure you tune in for another feisty hour here as we go through today's big news stories. 0344 499 1000 is how you call us, WhatsApp us and voice note us. 87222 is how you text us the word talk at the start of your message, as well as message and follow us on X at talkTV. Well, let's go to our next great guest. He is former Labour Party spokesman. He is Mr. James Mathewson, and I'm always delighted to have him on the show. Hello, James. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm good. Now, James, obviously, because of being a former Labour Party spokesperson, I think clinging on by your fingernails maybe as a supporter, but I apologise if I got that wrong.
I've left the party. I'm not a member anymore. I'm not supporting the current leadership, put it that way.
Well, I'm delighted then to get your view on this, James. So we have obviously this extraordinary by-election coming up in Gaunton and Denton due to the resignation of Andrew Gwynn on health grounds. We have heard in the background for a while now that Andy Burnham wishes to return to Westminster and would actually, for many Labour MPs, it seems, on the backbenches, be a real good figurehead to actually take over from Sir Keir Starmer and give Labour a fighting chance come to the next election. But at the same time, we're now hearing extensive briefings from the Labour's National Executive Committee and indeed those close to Sir Keir Starmer that they will plan to block Andy Burnham from being allowed to even go forward to a vote of the local members. Is this just completely outrageous, or is Sir Keir Starmer right to not let what some might describe as a fox loose in the henhouse?
I mean, it's crazy to think that, Andy Burnham's some kind of insurgent politician. I mean, he's been in the Labour Party longer than Keir Starmer has. He's been a Labour MP before Keir Starmer was a member of the Labour Party. So, Andy Burnham is well known, and he has a fantastic track record. This is why Keir Starmer's team are terrified of him, because they know there are very few people. It's not for a lack of talent necessarily, but there are very few people who could kind of coalesce a movement around them strong enough to be able to challenge Keir Starmer. And the thing is, when you take over the levers of the Labour Party, because it's a very democratic party, it has lots of democratic processes. When you take over the party, what happens inevitably is you try and, stack those levers in your favour. And the National Executive Committee is one of those bodies, right? So we saw it with Jeremy Corbyn. He did the same. He stacked people on it, the trade unions that were kind of favourable to him. And Starmer's done the same. So he has kind of control of those mechanisms. And Starmer can block anybody who wants to stand as a Labour MP for selection anywhere in the country, including Andy Burnham. So I have no doubt Andy Burnham will be fully aware of this, and he won't want to shoot his shot if he thinks he's going to miss, because what would happen then is, of course, they would say, here's the application, we've got the application, we're going to leak it inevitably, and isn't it embarrassing because he's not been selected? And that would damage him in Manchester, even in his mayoralty position.
Well, what's interesting here, sorry, James, is that this seat is a sort of three-way split from what I can see in some of the opinion polls between Labour, Reform and the Green Party, all within around 5 to 6%, depending on whichever sort of pollster you use. I just think that Andy Burnham has the best chance of hoovering up enough Green voters to stem the Reform tide that is going to be hitting in and around Greater Manchester. If you want the stop Reform candidate, surely Burnham is the best choice. And a Keir Starmer appointed candidate, when the Green Party can then see that they maybe have an outside chance, or even closer than an outside chance, of actually winning it, if they don't see Burnham there, they'll think, why don't we go for it? Why don't we take votes off Labour instead to make sure that we're the ones who are seen as the stop Reform candidate? Don't you think that Burnham would actually give Labour a better chance of winning this seat?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, the only thing that could get me back in the Labour Party right now would be an Andy Burnham leadership, or possibly an Angela Rayner leadership, but I think that's more unlikely. But I do think Burnham could do that. And I think there's a reason for this. And it's not just because of his, general popularity in Manchester and the North. It's because he can communicate in ways that Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves and people like that simply cannot. Reform, and this is where I'm afraid, probably disagree, Jonathan. Reform are a populist movement, right? And the way that you counter populism is not with more populism. What you need to do is you need to come at it, and you need to be able to talk in language that people understand. And when you talk like Keir Starmer, and you've got, Donald Trump on the world stage, and you've got Keir Starmer kind of jumping around and trying to use lawyerly language and say things that he doesn't mean. Nobody cares. It just doesn't measure up in the same way when you've got people as blunt as Donald Trump, as blunt as Nigel Farage. You need someone equally as blunt who can be able to deliver messaging in a way that people can easily understand. Burnham is that person for me, and I don't think there's anybody else in the Labour movement who could do it.
But what do you think about the fact that allies of Sir Keir Starmer were saying, look at the bond markets? When it was thought that Burnham could come back, he was getting them scared, especially because he says that the Labour Party is at hog to the bond markets, and maybe he would be making the same mistakes as Liz Truss, or do you not buy that?
Nah, I mean, they're saying one thing and they're doing another. The thing Liz Truss did was actually go out with outlandish policies and crazy kind of conspiracy-based changes to the way structures are done. Andy Burnham recognises problems and he can identify them, but it doesn't mean that he's going to shake them up to a degree where there's going to be, abject terror. The relationships the Labour Party's built over the past, 5-6 years with the markets, with the city, with financial industries has bothered a lot of people in the Labour Party, because you can hold these people to account. You can have healthy and productive relationships without being, kind of a slave to them, and without having to kind of just slavishly follow their way of doing things economically. So it's not about him upturning everything. The man's not. I heard somebody say the other day that he's a Marxist. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. He was a Blairite. He was under Blair in the Labour Party. That's where he cut his teeth. So he's none of those things, but he is somebody who can communicate in a way that I think people will respond positively to.
But is it not fair to say, James, that Andy Burnham is definitely going to pitch on a higher spending, higher borrowing, and therefore likely to mean higher tax economy in order to meet all the things that he'll want to spend money on?
But that's the Labour way, Jonathan. That's why you're not in the Labour Party, because you don't like doing things that way. This is it. This is the difference here, right? And I've got to say, like it or lump it, I'm afraid Tories like you, or former Tories, I'm sorry, I know you've defected now. Former Tories like yourself were the ones who gave the space to Nigel Farage to be able to build this movement, this far-right insurgent politics that we see. But let me tell you, Andy Burnham is somebody who I think equally you would be scared of, as well as Keir Starmer, which is good for me and good in my books.
Well, look, I will tell you this. Number one, there's nothing wrong with being popular, James. And I think this idea, using populism as an attack line, I always find utterly bizarre. Number two, the Conservative Party absolutely have a record that they should be very embarrassed of. And people like me were sick of fighting internally for conservatism within the Conservative Party. So felt the Conservative Party had left us for too long, and we had to go and find it in the home that I think is in Reform UK for people of my political persuasion. But I will also give you this. I think Andy Burnham would be an increased threat to potential Reform UK gains in the Red Wall, a place that I live in, as you know, James, because I think that Andy Burnham, has this sort of current image built around him of being this straight-talking king of the North. I do think, however, if Andy Burnham were to become leader, he'll still inherit the same economic mess. He'll still inherit a divided Labour parliamentary party. He'll still inherit, obviously, a legacy of Labour policies that have been deeply unpopular in the past 18 months. And so, whilst I think he will present Labour with a better opportunity to not have to get completely wiped out, as I think Keir Starmer's on current trajectory, I do think that there's a lot of rhetoric around Andy Burnham. I'm not quite sure on delivery. We've only got to look in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, where the mid-Staffordshire crisis under his watch is something that looms large over local communities like I live in.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I think one thing we can agree on, Jonathan, is that Andy Burnham would bring something that I think Reform wants to bring to the country, which is something that people have been asking for nigh on 15 years, and that's change. And change is the crucial element here. It's a change in a direction you don't want to see. It's the change in the direction I want to see. It's just a battle of which change do the British public want to see. That's what it will be. But I'll tell you now, that's far more refreshing. I would rather have the options at the ballot paper to be change in one direction or the other than status quo with kind of, soulless and directionless bureaucrats like Starmer and Reeves, at the end of the day.
Oh, look, I totally agree with you, and I think that this is why, actually, this could be a fascinating by-election, because Zach Polanski, leader of the Green Party, is from Greater Manchester. There's rumours that he may even consider putting himself forward for this seat, I think, depending on, let's be frank, on who the candidate is. If Andy Burnham is able to become the candidate, do you think this would be a good chance for Zach Polanski to show, look, I'm going to be a grown-up. I've already said publicly I'm willing to work with a Labour-led party under Andy Burnham. I'm going to say that either the Green Party will stand aside and make this the shootout between Labour and Reform.
Yeah, it's a real test of that for the Greens, because everyone's instinct is to hold on to whatever they've gained, right? That's a natural instinct among everyone. It's the same on the left as it is on the right, right? You know, for all that we on the left love to hold the moral high ground and pretend that we're righteous about everything, you know, those instincts still prevail a lot of the time. And letting go of that power, that's real. That's you know, it takes a lot of substance to do that. So I'll be impressed by Zach Polanski if he can do that, and he'll be one step closer to getting my vote. Not that it matters, because I'm in Scotland and it's a different lot of Greens here anyway, so it won't matter to him. But you know, at the end of the day, I think that will show real character, and we could be in for having some kind of progressive alliance further down the line if he does that.
Well, it's the thing certainly that we saw in that Caerphilly by-election that shows that when you get a progressive movement behind, as we saw with Plaid, that it was obviously able to stop reform. People like me would obviously say this is the problem with the progressive left and why we need to have Conservative Party voters do the right thing and get behind reform to get rid of the socialists. But hey-ho, well, I'm sure we'll duke that out, James, as and when those times come further down the line. I'm interested, James, to get your views on what was announced yesterday. 29 councils will now have their elections, I use the word cancelled. The Labour government would use delayed, postponed for another year. I would say this is a denial of democracy. There's obviously outrage from Reform UK, from the Conservatives, albeit ironically the Conservatives have councils of their own covering 1.1 million people that are also cancelling elections. Yeah. Do you think this is the wrong thing to do? Does this send the wrong message from this Labour-led government under Sir Keir Starmer that they are frit and are scared of the electors? Or do you think the argument about local government reorganisation is a fair one?
Here's a controversial take for you. I really don't think it matters at all. I mean, it does in the principle of it, because obviously people need to be able to vote. But right now, the whole dictator line and all the rest of it, I think people are just kind of rolling their eyes at it. They're not that bothered. You know, at the end of the day, local government is something that is already complex enough for people to try and understand. Half of my mates don't even know they're able to vote on May 7th when it comes to it. You know, there's that much complication when it comes to local governments. Up here in Scotland, so many people have no idea that they're sending an MSP to Holyrood. They think on the 7th of May they're going to be sending an MP to Westminster. So there's already confusion going on. I don't think it will cut through politically and damage them in the way that perhaps, you know, the opposition hope it will. But of course, in principle, we want everyone to be able to vote, and they should be able to. It's not ideal, and local government needs a right good reform to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I say reform in the true meaning of the word there.
I know, don't worry, James. I was about to say local government does need reform. It needs Reform UK. You teaming up nicely there.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you did a good job of spotting it. That's why you used to be a spokesperson for the party. You know exactly what you're doing. Now, out of interest as well, we've seen Shabana Mahmood has now started to use a military barracks in Crowborough in East Sussex, where she's placed so far 27, what I would say illegal migrants, I appreciate, James, someone like you would say asylum seekers, into accommodation instead of in hotels. And this site can take up to a maximum of 500 people. I would argue that makes no dent to the 36,000 currently languishing in hotels who should actually be detained and deported. Obviously, James, that won't shock you. That's my worldview. I mean, how does it make you feel as someone who is, like you say, naturally a Labour person, albeit obviously you've sort of given up under Sir Keir Starmer's leadership for the time being in terms of backing the Labour Party specifically. How does it make you feel to see that this is the kind of thing that's being done under a Labour government? Shabana Mahmood, you know, talks a lot of tough rhetoric. In fact, some would say that she was auditioning for reform with some of the things that she's been saying. But our listeners are saying she's all talk, no action. Obviously, you can imagine our audience, James, is maybe not sympathetic to Labour. But like, surely her rhetoric is hemorrhaging votes to the left.
Exactly, that's my point. Listen, you're never going to support the Labour Party, are you, Jonathan?
No.
No, exactly. So why is she trying to get you on side? It makes no sense politically, right? You offer your values first. And if everybody just did that in politics, right, we would have a democratic system that functioned. We'd have a pluralist society where everybody can support who they want to support and they have their right to their vote and their freedom of their vote. The problem comes when you get people who are, you know, supposedly driven by one set of values, pretending to be a set of another so that they can try and get votes from another side of the political spectrum. You don't need to do that. There are enough progressive votes in Britain to curry favour and to get into government. The problem is they're scared of it because they're scared of it in places like the Red Wall. They're scared of communities that they neglected for many, many years. And they're scared of those voices that have come out there since Brexit, really, and have kind of found that process of being able to break with tribal Labour voting patterns and be able to offer their vote somewhere else. And the Labour Party never really dealt with that, never really knew how to deal with it. So now you've got people like Shabana Mahmood, who sounds like Theresa May during a hostile environment era. You know, she sounds exactly like that. And nobody in their right mind who supports the Labour Party and has, you know, traditionally would listen to that and think that's a bit of me. It makes no sense at all. So why she is doing that, why Starmer continues to go with this, you know, I mean, it was evident from the Island of Strangers rhetoric that he tried out and then within 48 hours had to roll back on because he realised that it wasn't popular. This is the problem when we have weather-vane politicians who just blow in whatever direction the headwind is the strongest. You know, I want to see people stand up to those headwinds and say, that's not what I got into politics for. Here's what I believe in. But unfortunately, when you end up with career politicians, you end up with people who see their job and the preservation of their job as far more important than actually doing the right thing. And that's why we end up with Shabana Mahmood.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because as you say, Shabana Mahmood famously, I think, went to Greece, if I remember correctly, and she was talking about the need for humanitarian aid for asylum seekers coming across the Mediterranean. She's previously called for an amnesty for all illegal migrants here, similar, by the way, to Boris Johnson, ironically. And, of course, there's also campaigns to prevent deportations of...
I've been with these people on these rallies. I spent my time in the Labour Party in my youth with these people on rallies. I was with Shabana Mahmood at pro-Palestinian rallies, right? And there's never been a more pro-Israeli figure in the Labour Party than she is now. It is bizarre, the transformation, and it is studied and it should be studied, but that transformation that takes place when politicians, especially those that come from supposedly working class and Labour movements, once they get into power, the transformation that happens for them to become all of a sudden, you know, bureaucratic and faceless figures. When I knew these people, I knew many cabinet members who are current cabinet members, who were people of principle, who were on campaigns regularly, all the rest of it. When they get these jobs and they get in these positions, they transform overnight. It's absolutely terrifying to witness.
What you say there, James, is what I hear from Labour councillors across the country that I've got to know over a number of years who, like you, have been on marches, been on rallies, been in groups supporting the very causes that you would stand up for, and they are absolutely astonished to see these people now saying something very different. The fact is that Shabana Mahmood has sounded more right-wing and conservative, to be quite frank, than many Conservative Home Secretaries and Home Office Ministers that I can think of since the Cameron 2010 era. I mean, it's extraordinary that I've, like you say, find myself sitting there going, this is all great, but like you say, do I believe it'll happen? No. And does it make me want to vote Labour anymore? No. And I just think that until, like you say, John Curtis says it's what some polls say 8 to 10% of the Labour votes gone to reform, but it's about 20% is hemorrhaging towards Lib Dems and the Greens, and of course another 20% I think currently thinking about sitting at home entirely. And those are the people that will be motivated, like you would say, James, by the causes and passion and values that you drive.
Exactly. And most people, by the way, right, people have their general values and their outlines, right, but people are busy. Not everybody who is politically engaged and, you know, looking at all these different stories that we kind of machinate over every day. But at the end of the day, what people want to see is conviction and self-belief. You're only going to believe in you're only going to give your vote to a politician who believes in themselves. And right now, when you hear Shabana Mahmood, you look in their eyes and you can see their mouth moving. You hear what comes out, and you can associate that with Conservative politics. But you look in their eyes and you know that they don't believe what they're saying. And if they don't believe what they're saying, how can the British public at the end of the day?
James Mathewson, thank you so much for joining us there, former Labour Party spokesperson. Really great to get your views and opinions on the big stories of the day. What do you think? We want to hear from you. Do you agree with James that Labour has no values, has no principles under Sir Keir Starmer's leadership? Do you agree that Shabana Mahmood is just pretending to say what she thinks the British people need to say? Are you someone who was a Labour supporter and has now left Labour because you're going to vote for the Greens, Liberal Democrats, or sit at home because you feel deeply let down by the rhetoric of this Labour government and some of the things that they're starting to do that you might see as far right? I would obviously say is common sense. 0344 499 1000 is how you WhatsApp us, how you call us, how you voice note us. 87222 is how you text us with a talk at the start of your message. And of course, you can message us and follow us on X at talkTV. We'll see you soon.
calling that Chinese super embassy a spy hub. I mean, we're actually having to move cables away because of security concerns about spying. Keir Starmer is now saying, oh, well, the advice says this. I'm saying that it's time for politicians to bring the politics into it, think about the risk, take the politically right decision on Chagos as well. That is a deal that benefits China, paying Mauritius £35 billion. That's money that should go into real defence to keep, to keep territory we already own, but surrender the sovereignty of it. That's completely wrong.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Great Britain. Me, Jonathan Gullis, here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. We just had James Mathewson, former Labour Party spokesperson, on with us shortly, talking about Andy Burnham and whether or not he will be able to run, and talking about the migrants being placed into Crowborough Barracks in East Sussex. And Elliot from Bushy is on the line, who wants to give us his view on what Labour is doing.
Thank you. I think it's absolutely disgusting. What does it really mean? You are putting migrants from one location into another location. These barracks should be used for colleagues I know and friends of mine personally who have fought in the army and have come back with terrible injuries. They are homeless. They can't get back into civil society. There's no assistance for them in a generic governmental type campaign. The government, this rotten government, Lord Danek, for all his wonderful words, and his acolytes and superiors, they should be valuing the efforts that our soldiers and members of our community have done for our heritage and our country. I cannot understand it at all why they would do this. And the fact that she's done it in the dead of night, to me, shows it. She talks and talks. Words are meaningless. It's meaningless. The government hates this country. I'm sorry to say it. They hate our heritage. They hate our values. They are complete traitors. There are people on the streets with no homes. Why can't we help them, our own people? It's all wrong. There's no values anymore in this country, and this is just another element. It's the tip of the iceberg. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's a disgrace. I can't say any more than that. And now you tell me, I heard that they will be allowed out, do their own thing. God knows what their own thing is. We're still paying for them. What's the difference between in a hotel or in a army barracks? A complete disgrace, traitors to our own nation, our heritage, and our values. And in the old days, as a traitor, you would be hung up and strung up. Well, I'm not advocating that, but I'm saying this is their true colours. It's terrible.
Well, Elliot,
to my colleagues who have come back from the army, they have no place. I was in Windsor. I met a guy on the street. He was perfectly genuine in Windsor, near the Royal Castle. He didn't have a place to sleep. Where was the army on this? Where was the church? Where were our values to help our own people? I can't put it in any other way. I'm so angry, and my colleagues and friends who have fought are so angry, and they're angry with their own superiors. It's similar to the fact that army leaders, our military leaders, have let governments, successive governments, destroy our armed forces. Where have they been? And where are they now? I say, Lord Danek, it all sounded wonderful. Well, words are cheap. Words are easy. Do something. That's what I feel about it.
Elliot, a passionate call. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate getting your views on that. We go to Matthew, who's in Warrington, not far from the Greater Manchester area, who wants to say what he thinks about Andy Burnham if he is brave enough to stand in this by-election in Gorton Denton, and is even allowed to stand in it if Sir Keir Starmer doesn't block him. Hello, Matthew.
It's great to speak to you, Jonathan.
Great to speak to you too, my friend.
I'm a recently joined member of the Reform, so I'll put my cards on the table straight away.
Good man.
I think Andy Burnham, if he goes for it, he's going to lose because reform. I don't think the Labour realise how much disdain there is for them in the country, and reform will win that seat. Hopefully, the Tories will step back and let them do that. He'll then lose he'll have to give up his mayor of Manchester, and I think reform will get that if he's got the right person in place. And reform don't have to do anything really, because the Labour Party just the party that keep giving. They've sold the soldiers down the road with the Northern Ireland Agreement amendments. They've sold the pensioners down the road. They've sold the farmers down the road. They've sold anything that's British. They've absolutely slaughtered, putting migrants in this hate. I'm a delivery driver. Every Teddy street I deliver to on my round, there is a HMO popping up on it. Capital investors are buying these houses for cash, ripping them to bare brick and turning them to 6-bedroom flats and telling everyone it's professionals living there. And they're getting signed agreements for 6.5 years off the local government for £650 a month for each immigrant that's living in it. And it's going to kill us. Never mind about the army barracks. You wait till these people start coming in. I've got one across the road from my house. I've got a 16-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old daughter. And I hope that when reform come into power, they rip these contracts up and all these vile leech people that are investing this money and sucking our taxpayers' money have got lumbered with these horrible, obscene houses. You want to see the state of them. They've converted the lofts. They're just putting rooms on. The value of the houses next door are not worth anything. There's a lady who lives across next door to me. She's a Christian lady. She goes to church. She's retired. She's absolutely petrified. And, they're all cowboy builders that are doing it. It's a disgrace. I'll be honest with you, Jonathan. I've never really been political until the last couple of years, since Brexit, really. And I've got in contact with the local reform, and I've not heard anything because I want to help out. I want to let people. Cause the problem we've got in Britain, people have the head in the sand. They need to pull the head out of the sand and see what's going around them. And I think it's slowly happening. Middle Britain are now getting what working class Britain have been getting for years. And the only people who can sort it out is Nigel. And Nigel's not a one-man team. He's got some really good people behind him, like yourselves. And I think there's more to come. I'd like to see a few Labour people come in across because they know what's going to go, because they're all going to be out of a job soon.
No, look, Matthew, I think this is a great call. One, the actual lived experience. Two, I think your line that I loved the most was middle-class Britain is now suffering what working-class Britain has been for decades. I think you hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much for your call and for those kind words too. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to get more involved, 0344 499 1000 is how you do it, by calling, WhatsApping and voice noting. 87222 is how you text us with the word talk at the start of your message. And of course, you can message and follow us on X at talkTV. I'll see you soon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello everybody, Jonathan Gullis here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. It's great to have you joining us, and what a show we've still got coming up for you. Lots of texts, lots of calls. Make sure you keep joining in. But we go to our next guest. His name is Kevin Hurley. He's former Detective Chief Superintendent in the Met Police. Hello Kevin, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Good morning to you.
Well, good morning to you, and thank you for joining us, Kevin. I mean, let's start with what is a very upsetting story, an upsetting story that's becoming far too common in this country. That is an illegal migrant who is living in a hotel has raped a woman, has now received a 7-year jail sentence and will be deported a third of the way through. Shret Calendar, a 28-year-old migrant from Trinidad, was staying in a migrant hotel when he turned up drunk at the victim's house looking for some, quote, loving, disgusting. When the victim said no, he forced himself on her and carried on regardless. Judge Richard Fuller, KC, said, you behaved in an animalistic and base way. I mean, the reality is it not, that when we have all these undocumented migrants who have come across on small boats or other illegal means, have found ways of ditching their identities as well as they can do, and are all of an age of around 18 to 40, that we are indeed endangering women and girls in our country?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one after another of undocumented illegal migrants, because whatever anyone says, the moment you step onto our shore without a visa, you are committing a potential offence under the Immigration Act 1971. So every single one of them is a suspect criminal, whatever what we might call the Bleeding Hearts Brigade might say. So let's remember they're committing an offence the moment that they arrive, and they should, if we had the resources, be arrested and held in secure accommodation whilst we fully document who they are, and then make a decision of, are they really an asylum seeker or not? But there's a second point here, and this is the concern to me. This guy carried out a stranger rape on an unfortunate woman in a hotel room, and all he got was 7 years.
Yep.
The maximum penalty for rape is life. The sentencing guidelines in some ways constrain judges to where they could go. So the first issue is, and I won't criticise the judge who made this decision, so the first issue is maybe we need to look at the sentencing guidelines for this type of rape and say the starting point is actually 15 years.
We can see on the screens now, sorry, Kevin Quigley, just say, for those watching, they can see this vile criminal scumbag's face on our screen. This is a face that should frighten men and women across this country, particularly young women and girls, because this is the face of illegal migration right here, taking advantage of our women and girls, endangering our streets and making people feel unsafe. It is utterly disgusting that this repugnant individual, like you say, got 7 years. And it goes to say, doesn't it, Kevin, that when Blair came in and outsourced many of these things, such as the Sentencing Council's guidelines, this should have been stuff that was kept at the discretion of ministers, so that it's the politicians as the ultimate lawmakers who are elected by the people can say, it is clear in this instance, minimum, as you say, I would for rapists, I would keep them in for indefinitely. I mean, I certainly would be empathetic to the death penalty when it comes to this kind of crime. It is utterly repugnant, and these people, I don't think, can ever be saved.
I mean, the problem is that the sentencing guidelines, and to some extent the judges, are constrained by the fact that we have not built enough prisons over the last 15 years to contain these people, or indeed to recruit and retain prison officers, because the whole thing of the failure to invest in prisons and policing generally is a bit of a vicious circle. Some noise in the background. What I mean by that is, because they can't retain local British personnel to be prison staff, we're actually relying to a large extent on Nigerian people who come here perfectly legally on visas, and there's now an issue that their visas are running out, and are they going to be allowed to stay to make up the staff in prisons? The bottom line is there's been a total lack of investment for many years, and you have to blame the Conservative government for this, for allowing this situation to get so bad. Probably in this case, but I don't know, it probably took a lot longer than a few months to get that case to court. That's because the courts have been cut in number, the judges have been cut in number, the Crown Prosecution Service. So I don't want to make a political point, but we need to get this solidly where it ought to be. The Tories created this. Now Labour need to put their money where their mouth is and fix it, because otherwise Reform will probably come and do it for them.
Well, I think what's concerning, to back you up there, Kevin, is that Labour is going to continue what, rightly, as you point out, the Conservatives started, which is, I think we're expecting around thousands more prisoners being released later on this year, some of whom will have committed horrific offences such as rape or sexual assault or shoplifting and petty crimes like shoplifting. And because of prison spaces. And what does that mean? Our streets being endangered, justice not being delivered, and victims, particularly of some of the most serious crimes, feeling scared of retribution from those that they helped finally get put down. And I just think it's a very sad state of affairs, and you are correct. We should have been building the prison estate up, and I think Nigel Farage's idea of Nightingale prisons in the short term, whilst you can then make the longer term investment into the prison estate, is entirely appropriate. If we can build hospitals overnight, as we did during COVID, we should be able to build up prison capacity by having Nightingale prisons and them guarded, and like you say, have a system where prison officers feel protected and respected, and have a big recruitment drive to tell people what a great career it can and will be, particularly those maybe who are currently serving police officers, who maybe the front line is getting a bit beyond them in their years, and therefore maybe a change of pace and to be in a prison is maybe something that's more available to them. Or ex-veterans, for example, who will have military training and experience, who would do a fantastic job also serving in His Majesty's Constabulary, keeping those scumbags behind bars. I think it's a sorry state of affairs. And, you know, I've been keen to get your view on this too, actually, is another story. Is Shabana Mahmood is making a huge announcement to cut back the number of police forces. So I think the current number is around 43. There's talks that it'll go down to around about 10 to 12 based on her reform. She wants to create these new sort of mega forces where they would deal with serious crimes such as obviously organised crime, complex cases such as murder, drugs and county line gangs. And then underneath them, there would be like local policing areas set up in every borough, town or city to tackle what they describe as everyday crimes, including shoplifting, phone theft and drug dealing. I'm keen, as someone who's obviously been in the force, is this a sensible thing? Is it too big and bureaucratic, and or is this going to just add more confusion about who does what?
Well, I mean, the first point I'll make is it would actually reduce bureaucracy in terms of dealing with cross-border issues. But let me just give you my background on this. In 2006, when the former Home Secretary, Charles Clarke, looked at doing this, I was actually the lead senior officer with going with the team around the police forces in the country, assessing them against certain criteria about how viable was their capability to respond to murders, organised crime, firearms incidents, serious public disorder, when some of them are less than 1,000 people in staff and some are 34 or 32,000 police officers, because that's the difference between forces. The second point that was being looked at is, do you really need 43 chief constables who are doing their own thing, when the reality is locally, people want constables on patrol, ideally on the beat, and locally they want detectives who know their local villains. People don't actually want lots of chief constables, assistant chief constables, even chief superintendents. What they want are the doers. And what we've created, and it's developed over the years from when there was once over 180 police forces, when every town had its own, then it became 116, and then it came down eventually to 43. We've created 43 separate edifices, which include a lot of people all doing the same job. Now, the reason I can say that is I was pretty senior in the Metropolitan Police, the biggest police force in the country, and considerably senior in the City of London Police, the smallest one. The City of London Police, when I got there, I was surprised to see that every function the Met had, they replicated with back office human rights, human resources, transportation, procurement, legal officers, planning people, when frankly they were in the middle of the Met, and there was no real argument for such a small organisation to have not only that, but their own senior leadership. Of course, the City of London will never cease to exist as a police force because they're effectively controlled and owned by the Corporation of London, and the City of London produces 13% of the economy, so they're going to want their own police force, whatever anyone says. But there is no argument for police forces like Lincolnshire or Dyfed Powys or Warwickshire or Dorsetshire or indeed Surrey to stand alone when they're small. The bottom line on it is, and I would use this example, albeit it seems a bit trite.
Well, I think that...
Have you still got
I heard you. Sorry, Kevin, I was just digesting it. Yeah, I've still got you. Sorry, I was just digesting everything you were saying. It was really interesting. And I think it's really exciting.
So
and...
let me,
Oh, go on. Sorry, Kevin. Go on. You go.
Let
you
me
go.
give you this example. So, and this is trite and perhaps not a good comparison, but you know that when you go into any McDonald's in the country, indeed the world, you will get the same product. You will get a Big Mac, a McFlurry, some fries, and so on. And you go in there because you like Big Macs. Now, if you're a member of the public and you get burgled, you want a police officer to turn up, you want a detective to come, and a fingerprint person to come along and look for clues. And you want that product whether you live in Liverpool, Cornwall, or Kent. It's the same product. McDonald's only has one head office in the country, unlike the police that have 43 to deliver the same McDonald's. It is nonsense to waste literally billions of police budget on all these senior management teams when what you want is a senior person who's the boss, subgroups of senior people, then split the force up into some big regions who all follow one doctrinal way of investigating major crime, providing surveillance teams and murder squads. But you still have your local police controlled by the local sergeant or local inspector, and it really doesn't matter what police force they belong to. And to be clear, having been in 2 police forces and been in the regional crime squad covering the whole of southeast of England, never once did a member of the public ever ask me what hat badge we were representing or what badge was on our warrant card. The only ones who were a bit scared is when you dealt with major criminals and they thought, you're from the regional crime squad, or when I did short time, you're from the Sweeney, because they were scared of the flying squad.
That's
Other
brilliant.
than that, relevance.
Well, look, Kevin, that is fascinating to have.
They should do it, save money.
No, look, I love it, and thank you for sharing your own frontline experience. And you've now I wasn't sure, now I'm feeling a bit more convinced this is the right thing to do, and I'll go and read more into it. Kevin Hurley there, former Detective Chief Superintendent in the Met Police. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, what do you think about slimming down our police forces to 10, but making sure they're more consistent? Do you think this sounds like a good idea to save some money and improve policing on our streets? And when it comes to migrants who are committing crime like this vile Shrek Calendar, who is a 28-year-old migrant from Trinidad who committed rape against a woman who is now being sentenced to 7 years, is this why we need to detain and deport, because these illegal migrants are endangering our streets? 0344 499 1000 to call, WhatsApp and voice notes, 87222 to text talk at the start of your message, and at talkTV if you want to message and follow us on X. We'll see you shortly.
You didn't vote on it last night, mate.
No, in Parliament there's something called being slipped, which is where you pre-agree with the whips that you got something else and you can't do it. The last Conservative government took a very long time to pass a bill which granted a degree of immunity to the brave men who fought in the period of the Troubles, so they didn't have to spend the last days of their lives being hauled through the courts or waiting for a letter to drop on their doormat telling them that they were now in danger. And the Labour government, for reasons none of us can fathom, have decided to unwind that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Talk, the home of common sense, and you're with me, Jonathan Gullis, and what a show we've had so far today. 0344 499 1000 to text us, to WhatsApp us, to call us and voice note us. To text us, it's 87222, the word talk at the start of your message, and you can message and follow us on X at Talk talkTV. We go to our next guest. His name is Elliot Keck. He's the head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance, and this is a story that will drive many of you mad. Hello, Elliot. How are you?
Hello, Jonathan. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, sir. So I'm just grabbing the story here because I just can't get over the fact. So we've got this thing called the 4-Day Week Foundation, which to some people sounds nice, but it's advocating for us all to be part of a 4-day working week. And they're now boasting that 253 firms have signed up to delivering the 4-day week, involving over 1,400 workers. They're arguing, which I'm sure you'll tell me, Elliot, is nonsense because my gut says it is, based on what we see with the productivity charts. They claim that across virtually every sector and region, employers are showing that shorter working weeks boost productivity, improve well-being and help and attract retain talent, all without cutting pay. The question is no longer whether it works, but how quickly others will follow. That is from Joe Ryle, campaign director. What's your take on this at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot?
Well, listen, we're very sceptical, and it's worth saying that although they like to talk about 253 companies, that is a tiny, tiny fraction of the total UK economy. These are likely self-selecting companies that, were already on similar working practices. They're dominated by things like marketing and charities and NGOs. What you don't find in that companies are many companies working in finance, agriculture, technology, the things that are really, really powering the economy. You're not finding those industries experimenting with these working practices. But listen, if you're a private company and you want to experiment with this, be my guest. Ultimately, you will have your customers and shareholders to answer to if it doesn't work. The key thing is this should not be allowed in the public sector.
Why is there such a push for this 4-day week? What evidence are people clinging on to from other parts of the world, maybe, that you guys have researched or seen? Because I just, like you say, I'm horrified at the idea this could ever happen in the public sector. And the problem is there is certainly, we know, a push. And I think working from home, the whole idea of, on Fridays most people work from home, that is essentially, particularly in the public sector, become the unofficial 4-day working week. And I think it is a very worrying time indeed when we see the state of the economy that we're currently living in.
Yeah, and I think probably in the case of some of these companies, at the very least, they probably became aware that essentially their staff were not doing any work on a Friday as it was, but as a result of that working from home. So you might as well give them the day off, and maybe some of them are therefore requiring their staff to be in the office the full 4 days otherwise, and actually you're getting slightly more work out of them maybe than if they're working from home 2-3 days a week. As I said, I'm very, very sceptical. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these companies reverse these policies, and I certainly wouldn't imagine we see these policies spread to the really important parts of the economy. But you touched on the public sector, I touched on the public sector. That's a really part that I'm really, really worried about. We're already seeing 4-day weeks start to crop up in some local councils and bits of the Scottish government, and the evidence that we're seeing is not very convincing at all. We're seeing drops in productivity, drops in performance, and we know that public sector productivity is already at crisis point. It hasn't grown for decades, and the last thing we should be doing is removing 20% of working hours and 20% of capacity.
Well, and the problem, as you would rightly probably point out, Elliot, like I'm going to in a minute, is that this is at the same time we've got a government that's introducing the Employment Rights Act. I know they're desperate to hang their hat on this particular peg, but what's the evidence? Unemployment's risen every month since Labour took office, with nearly 1.9 million people now unemployed, 4.2 million people on universal credit who are not expected to ever find work, and 1.5 million of those were added since Labour came to power. We've got 300,000 private sector jobs lost, and then 80,000 public sector jobs rolled added on. So Labour's just trying to fudge the figures by increasing the size of the state. 217,000 fewer people on payroll since Labour came to power, and a youth unemployment at 15.9%. Over 100,000 young workers off payroll, which is absolutely terrifying, accounting for almost half of job losses. I mean, when you've got people trying to push this kind of nonsense, and then you've got this state of the current economy and what the Labour government's doing to it with hiking national insurance, making it harder to employ people by making an 18-year-old the same value as a 25-year-old despite very different skill sets. I mean, this is just worse after worse, is it not?
Yeah, and this is successive governments over many decades shifting powers and shifting rights from employers to employees. And that sounds nice, that sounds warm and cuddly, but the result is that for many employers, it's just not affordable to employ many people at the moment. They're having to significantly cut back on jobs, cut back on hours. They're looking more at technology and AI to take over those roles because it's just not affordable or viable to employ people. And listen, one of the dirty secrets is that actually in much of the economy, in the really important parts of the economy, work from home is dead. There is no work from home in farming. There's not much work from home even in things like finance, and there certainly isn't work from home in manufacturing anymore. This is the last vestiges of things like the public sector, the third sector, NGOs, universities, charities, and so on. And I think 4-day weeks is just part of this broader culture of work shyness, of a desire for far too many in the country and working in these industries to live a life of leisure. And the result of that is, of course, significantly depressed economic growth, reduced taxes, and the economic malaise that we see in this country.
Elliot Keck, Head of Campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your views. We will be going to a quick break before we're going to take more of your texts and calls. Oh, apologies, sorry. My team behind the glass just saved me there. We're not going to a break. We are going to take some calls in a minute, and I'm going to read out some of your texts. So, first of all, let's read out what Cheryl said. So Cheryl said here that she's fine with illegals being placed into disused army barracks, but under no circumstance should they be permitted to wander freely within our communities, nor should they be getting considered for asylum unless perhaps they can provide ID, so we know who we are dealing with and they aren't a criminal. I believe we need to deport the bulk of them ASAP before our beautiful country gets changed beyond redemption. So I think, we're going to have this kind of, balance at the end of the day when it comes to accepting that if we want to get rid of hotels, we've got to use disused army barracks, but people must be detained and they then must be deported. If that is not done, then there is simply no deal with the British people. Another text here from Brad in Cambridge. Jonathan, it's going to be a doddle for the 65 Border Force task guys. All they have to do is to sit at home and order Deliveroos and wait for the immigrants to show up. Simple as well. Brad saying it as it is. And then George has texted in, putting illegals in army camps, luxury hotels and HMOs. The government should buy or rent a field just outside Dover, put a 10-foot electric fence around it with double security gates. Then when they arrive illegally, put them in the field, give them a tent and blankets, basic food and water. That's all they're entitled to. Well, I did advocate that when I was an MP and got chastised for it, but ironically now seems to be sort of mainstream. We've got some more voice noise. Let's listen to what Nikki has to say about the migrant camp in Crowborough.
I live and work out in Italy for part of the year, and I have to live next door to a big English enclave. They are very noisy, aggressive, and for the most time inebriated, but I just have to get on with it. In Crowborough, yes, it's not an ideal solution, but these asylum seekers have to go somewhere until they're processed.
I think you make a good point there, Nikki. They're going to have to go somewhere. Is it not better than in hotels? But detain. Do not let these people wander the streets. We've got Claire with a voice note about President Trump.
I do think that other NATO countries haven't ever made enough effort towards defending Europe. It's ironic listening to the pearl-clutching sort of Labour MPs come out and pretend to be the biggest supporters of the military now when they've just voted to drag our veterans through the courts regarding the Troubles, and the ones that were always, out in the streets protesting against wars and stuff like that and saying that soldiers and military shouldn't be supported. It's been interesting to hear everybody come out and pretend to be the biggest supporters of our military, and perhaps that's what Trump's point is to actually flush people out and make them fight for this country rather than just giving up.
Well, Claire, interesting point of view there, and I'm glad you highlighted the Northern Ireland Troubles legislation. I was part of the team with Brandon Lewis that introduced a bill that made sure we pardoned all veterans in the sense that there would be no more court cases. That did mean having to say that there would be no more cases against IRA terrorists, but the truth of the matter was they weren't getting prosecuted. The Republic of Ireland government were not cooperating properly, and obviously the IRA are not going to be keeping all their paperwork and sharing it with the British government. So we said it's time to make sure Northern Ireland draws a line in the sand and move on. And this Labour government's come in and now endangered our serving veterans by having to be dragged back through the courts with vexatious claims. It is a disgrace, and it has not had the time in the sun that it should have done when it comes to news coverage. I know on this station it has, but on the broader mainstream media it hasn't, and I hope it will get more views from there. And we've also got Ash, who sent a voice note in on Andy Burnham.
Andy Burnham would be a disaster. He hasn't got a great record as Mayor of Manchester. That's a myth. He's tainted with the grooming gang scandal that he's done nothing about. And he wants to ignore the bond markets, in his own words, and borrow another £40 billion instantly. He would be a disaster, and that's why the markets have reacted badly to him. So, fine, let him destroy Labour even further. Let's hope he does get in.
Oh, there we go. People got their views. We've got Andrew in Hertfordshire who wants to give us his view on that disgusting rape from an illegal migrant. Hello, Andrew. How are you?
Good morning. You do a cracking job. Very interesting to hear your views. In relation to that individual, the woman is serving a life sentence.
Yes.
When Robert Jenrick said that the country was broken, if you look at the way that we don't support the army, the people that look after people in jails and police officers, and then you look at this sentence, the country is broken. People sat in a room to do the sentencing, and they said, at the end of the day, it's just non-consensual sex. It's nothing, that's all it is, so we'll make it 7 years. How dare they? Any male or female that's raped, they live with it for their lifetime. That individual, if it were me, I'd hang him. Just hang him. It has to go that way.
Andrew, I think you speak for a lot of the country on this. You know, I'm naturally opposed to the death penalty, but I am absolutely sympathetic when it comes to rape, to paedophilia, to terrorists, to murder. I absolutely get it. And I'm not saying it's something I couldn't be convinced to back. I just think that, you know, I would like to see harsh. I just worry that that's a quick way out for some people. I would like to see dingy Victorian-style dungeons where people literally have some straw on the floor and a meal of gruel once a day at best, and the keys thrown away and forgotten about them. But I totally understand, as you say, the sentencing guidelines are not strong enough and is done in a cold manner of a legalistic language and not thought about from an emotional viewpoint. So thank you for your call there, Andrew. Just so you quickly know before we go to our next break, David Lammy is hinting that he's going to potentially U-turn on his plan to scrap half of jury trials. He's now open to, quote, a conversation. Another Labour U-turn incoming. We need a klaxon at this point to remind ourselves every time this happens. Is this the 14th, 15th, 16th, 14th? The Telegraph's claiming. Well, never sees the day. So what do you think? Are you delighted to hear this breaking news that potentially we're going to see a U-turn on cancelling our rights under Magna Carta to be trialled by jury? 0344 499 1000 is how you call us, WhatsApp us and voice note us. 87222 is how you text us with the word talk in the starting message, and messages and follow us on X. I've got a brew. I'll see you in 2. Cheerio, everybody.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And it's now good afternoon, Great Britain. Me, Jonathan Gullis, here on the home of Common Sense, and delighted to have our next guest ready to go on the show and talk all things politics in the news today. Mr. James Heal, he is the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. I think one of the best in the Westminster lobby. I love reading his stuff. Make sure you sign up and listen to it too, as well as obviously his House Shots podcast, which I know is great as well. So, Mr. Heal, how are you, sir?
I'm very good, Jonathan. How are you doing?
I'm good. I only take a small fee for all that loving, by the way, just so you know. So it's a small fee.
Thank you.
No worries at all. Well, look, James, I just can't help but make sure we cover this breaking news where David Lammy, it's been reported in the Telegraph, has said he's open to, I quote, a conversation on alternatives to the plan of scrapping half of all jury trials. This has been a campaign I think 60 Labour MPs, lawyers and peers across all parties have been lobbying. Carl Turner has even threatened to cause a by-election, which is a word that's probably shivering down the spine of Sir Keir Starmer at every turn now. I mean, the Telegraph is saying this would be 14th U-turn in 18 months if this were to happen. This was inevitable, wasn't it, James? We could have told David Lammy he was going to get here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing we all know is that Labour's the party of the lawyers, right? And so the one thing they don't want to do is kind of do something which the Bar Associations has come out and criticised. A lot of ex-lawyers, some of whom the cynic might say will be searching for a new job in maybe 3 years' time, and they might want to go back to the legal profession and therefore wouldn't take too kindly to this. So no great surprise. Carl Turner's been very outspoken on it, but he's certainly tapping into something, which is that a lot of Labour MPs feel very squeamish about this. And right now, can Keir Starmer get anything past his backbenches? Doesn't look like it, does it?
It's quite difficult to claim that Reform UK, for example, James, is some sort of authoritarian far-right regime, whilst at the same time you're trying to scrap jury trials, cancel elections. I mean, it doesn't really stack up.
Yeah, digital ID as well. I think this is always something that happens, though. Labour gets into power, civil liberties law, that they are in maybe opposition. Someone like Keir Starmer, you know, civil liberties lawyer, wrote the literal book on human rights, and then they go in, they have to sort of countenance lots of measures that would have been heresy had it been the Conservatives proposing it. And yeah, I mean, unfortunately for them, they basically came in without much of a plan. And I think that a lot of their sort of sense of the country's Britons was, oh, we'll just get rid of the blue rosettes, replace them with red. And actually, they're sadly much more structural and underlying.
I think, James, you're a great historian. Trying to scrap rights that were delivered to us under Magna Carta is quite something, is it not?
Yeah, certainly. There's only 3 clauses left from the 1215 document, but obviously all the rights of the freeborn Englishman, you know, obviously linked back to that. So I think it's quite something that, you know, David Lammy, of course, as Foreign Secretary, was the man who tried to give away the Chagos Islands and sort of ensure that the sun finally set on the British Empire. Having done all that work, he's now gone to justice and potentially ending, you know, 8 centuries of English legal history.
Indeed, I love the way you phrase that. Now, James, you're a politico like me. We're both sad political nerds, okay? Well, maybe I'm sadder than you because I actually try and put myself in frontline politics. You just keep people like me honest. But listen, James, you must have been as excited as I was to hear of a by-election because of all the drama that comes with it and what we're about to find out happens. I mean, in this Gaunton and Denton by-election that we're due to have due to Andrew Gwynn's resignation due to health reasons, we are now facing the prospect of a 3-way fight between Labour, Reform UK and the Greens. We've now got the melodrama of whether or not Andy Burnham will even be allowed to stand and what are the ramifications if he's blocked within his own, in Sir Keir Starmer's parliamentary party, with his councillors, with his members. But if indeed he does stand, then that will be in another by-election for the Mayor of Greater Manchester, which the polling would suggest could be a big shootout between Labour and Reform UK, who may lose the parliamentary constituency but could get maybe, I would consider, the bigger prize of the mayoralty. I mean, Sir Keir Starmer, after dealing with Trump and Greenland, must have been exhausted. And then 24 hours later, someone's knocked on his door and said, we have a by-election in Greater Manchester. How do you feel about this, boss?
Well, yeah, I think that in opposition, it was sometimes said that Keir Starmer had a lamp with a magic genie, such was his good fortune. If that genie did exist, they've certainly crossed the floor, because right now nothing is going the Prime Minister's way, is it? I think that, look, when it comes to by-election, fascinating. Is Polanski going to stand for the Greens? Who are Reform going to select to put there? And, of course, if it's Andy Burnham, to be frank, it was obvious if he's going to be selected and he gets elected, then they would probably be, seen as a potential challenger to Keir Starmer. I mean, you could see that maybe going down well. I think given Andy Burnham's history of bottling it, to use a pejorative term, I'm not sure he's necessarily going to go for it. And I would make the point, Jonathan, that at the end of the last year, we were talking about Shabana Mahmood's reforms on immigration, and we said that the fate of the government is potentially in Shabana Mahmood's hands. Well, of course, she is also, along with being Home Secretary, the chair of the NEC. And so she is going to be someone potentially who has a big role. And you could say the future of Andy Burnham and Keir Starmer's future is in her hands right now. So very interesting to see what happens.
Well, to be cheeky there, James, I'd also Shabana Mahmood's holding the fate of Wes Streeting in his hands, because lots of rumours that she's the campaign manager for Wes Streeting's potential leadership campaign too. And I'm sure Wes would be delighted to not see Andy Burnham enter Parliament, who will be his main challenger.
I had a coffee the other day with a very senior Labour MP who was, making that point. They think currently...
Oh, sorry, James, the signal's just cracking up there, just so you know. We'll quickly make sure we get that sorted out, because I'd love to get your view on it. But as you've heard there from Mr. James Hill, we are talking about the fact that Andy Burnham is in this position where he obviously wants to try and find a way back to Westminster, allegedly. I think James is back on the line with us now, sorry. Hey, James, can you hear us? Oh, no, OK, he's just dropped off. We'll quickly make sure we get him back. Don't you worry, ladies and gents, because I love hearing what James Hill has to say. Well, I want you to make sure you're calling in, ladies and gentlemen, 0344 499 1000, and WhatsApping us and voice noting us, texting in the word talk at the start of your message to 87222, and message us and follow us on X at talkTV about David Lammy now looking to potentially U-turn on his plans to scrap half of jury trials. Would you welcome this U-turn? Will it improve your opinion of the Labour Party? Or is this something that was inevitable and just shows more chaos under Labour? I also want to make a point that we have also had more breaking news too. We have had the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has put out a statement following those comments by President Trump, where he said that British troops who were serving Afghanistan and Iraq were simply hanging back. And the Prime Minister has said the following: Trump was wrong in diminishing sacrifice as part of NATO in Afghanistan. The President was wrong to diminish the role of troops, including British forces. 457 British personnel were killed in Afghanistan, more wounded. Many suffered life-changing injuries. Their sacrifice and others were made in service of security and in response to an attack on an ally. So, powerful words there. Mr. Hill is back on the line with us. Hello, James. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Jonathan. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. No worries at all. Don't worry. It's the world we live in. Now, James, sorry, you were just saying about Burnham, because I find this interesting, because I agree with you. Burnham's got a history of bottling it, and also I find it quite funny that whilst Andy Burnham's got this image as the King of the North, and he's certainly rebranded, he's always been seen as a Keir Starmer figure who sits on fences as well. If you look at his history and his record when he was in government, or indeed when he ran for leadership in the past, and he took different positions at different times throughout those contests. In fact, some would argue it's a bit weird that you want to put the guy in charge of the Labour Party who couldn't even beat Jeremy Corbyn, who led us to our biggest ever defeat. And of course we saw the bond markets react quite nervously when it heard, because Andy Burnham only the day before, I wonder if there's some sequencing there, has said that we're still at hoc to the bond markets in government. I mean, Starmer's allies would say Andy Burnham's going to bring Trussite politics and chaos to the British economy, is he not?
Yes, we did hear some of that briefing last year, didn't we? Suggestions that exactly would happen when it looked like he was going to make a challenge around Labour conference time. I think the danger for the Labour Party is the only thing they've got one chance. Talk about trust there. What happened in the last Parliament was they changed Prime Minister twice. And so you ended up with insurmountable calls for a general election. I think Labour's only got one chance at a switcheroo. And to do that before May or after May. And those arguing for a switch before May think, hang on, why are we sort of waiting around to kill our own narrative and wipe out half our party in Wales and Scotland? Why not do it now to try and save as many people as possible? The other half are saying, hang hang on a sec, it's not important to change leader before then because, they're just going to get walloped straight away and kill any momentum. We can't change again. So I think this whole thing is going to paralyse the Labour Party. Those on the right obviously want Wes Streeting. Those on the left probably want, or centre-left I should say, probably want someone like Burnham or Rayner right now. But at the moment, there's, I think, not the kind of critical push to get rid of it. And given the field is so wide open, half the party are the reason to stop whoever it may be.
And I think it's interesting, this election, because Zach Polanski, as you say, he's from Greater Manchester, so there's a lot of talk that he may well actually put himself forward for this. But if Burnham stands, he has previously said that he would be willing, as leader of the Green Party, to work with an Andy Burnham-led Labour Party. So there is an idea, is there not, James, that if you let Burnham run, he will be the best chance at doing the Stop Reform candidate that we saw Plaid Cymru in Caerphilly. If you have a Keir Starmer appointed candidate, and it sounds like there's some number of councillors and council leaders in Greater Manchester who have been discussed, that will just embolden the Greens to go, well, the MRP say we're only 4% behind you. We'll shove our leader in there who's dynamic, who's bold, who's got a massive social media following, is able to get cut through in a way that Nigel Farage is able to too. And let's make this a fight. And let's make the point that it's the Greens who are the Stop Reform Party, and it's the Greens who are here to replace the Labour Party, like Reform are here to replace the Conservative Party. I mean, like you say, the dynamics around this are just fascinating, aren't they?
Yes, they're fascinating. And I also think that for some in the Green Party, it's personal, not business, in the sense that they loathe Keir Starmer. A lot of them are Corbynites, saw what the dear leader happened to him. The fate drummed out of the party in October 2020 by Keir Starmer. And Starmer very much, he's only had one mode, really, which is bash the left. Bash the left has been this whole thing for the past 6 years of his leadership because they want to seem different. They want to appeal to publications like mine, viewers like yours, Jonathan. And so I think that as a result, the left have thought, well, we have found somewhere else to go, and it's in the Green Party. So I don't think they're going to do Keir Starmer any favours. Yeah, the interesting thing, of course, would be a potential Burnham Polanski. What would happen there? If I were Polanski, I probably wouldn't risk it. I'd probably stick to London if I were him personally. But hey, I mean, this is the thing: is by-elections can be really interesting times. You see some great famous figures from the past who came back from Parliament. You likes of Roy Jenkins, Shirley Williams in the early 80s. But they can also ruin careers as well. So I think no one wants to lose it. But sometimes in politics, you need a bit of guts.
Have you heard about any of the movers and shakers, James, that may run for Reform UK? I know you're plugged into what they're doing. Dan Barker is a party board member. He obviously ran for the Manchester mayoralty. Assuming that mayoralty doesn't become available to run for, he would be one name. But are there any other figures that you can hear of that may be floated around? Some on Twitter are trying to suggest Zia Youssef. I think that would be a very big gamble for Zia Youssef, as you say, in a particularly three-way fight.
So my understanding is that it'll probably be, at the moment, I think, someone who'll be local, a bit like Sarah Poacher. I mean, they're going to probably do the Runcorn playbook. She was selected at short notice, within 2 months of the contest, polling day, and she was a local magistrate, obviously in her 50s, had a great profile. And you go for someone like that, a local champion who thinks, hang on, I'm going to stand up for ordinary values. You think it's going to be a tricky by-election, so you wouldn't want to risk one of your big beasts there. And I think we're going to hear more about that on Monday when Nigel Farage is due to do a press conference. So at the moment, I think they're not in the mode of we have to find a candidate immediately. But I think it's going to be a conversation more over the weekend and at the beginning of next week.
And James, if Labour lose this by-election, assuming Andy Burnham doesn't run, Labour lose this by-election, do you think this might then be the push from the Wes Streeting camp or even the Angela Rayner camp, if rumours are true, to say we have to take Starmer out now before May? Or do you think it's unlikely we'll see that challenge happen this early?
I mean, I think that if I was Labour whips, I'd probably try and hold this on the same day as the local elections, right? So I think that it obviously may become the face of that election night because, a lot of the English elections are cancelled. Frankly, Jonathan, I think a lot of English people would struggle maybe with knowing anyone in the Senate or Holyrood. So no disrespect to those institutions, that's just how things are. So I think that could be a very good catalysing moment. But if it does happen beforehand, I suspect that we're going to have, sort of a double whammy, but it wouldn't be enough. And I think everyone's just waiting after May because I just think that given the Labour Party's institutional barriers, given the lack of kind of a clear person, I think that as a result of that, they're going to wait until after May, I suspect.
Well, incredible times, James. I mean, I'm like you, fascinated to see what will come out of it because I think that that's the strategy I would employ. I'd have it on the same day. One of the things that used to drive the Conservative Party MPs crazy was that you had this continuation of bad news with by-election loss after by-election loss outside of election time that just further sunk into the public narrative that Conservatives were on the way out. And you're right, look, if you end up on a night for Labour where you've lost your third, maybe fourth in Wales, you are second or third in Scotland, you have obviously lost therefore loads of MSs, you've lost councillors across the country too, and then you lose this by-election, is it not better to just get that pain over and done with in one go? And at least if you hold it, try and have something positive for whoever's doing the media round to point at.
Yeah, totally. And as I say, why have the kind of drip, drip, drip of death? You actually probably just want to have it one and done and then sort of fight to survive. Incredible, isn't it, for a Labour Prime Minister who was, two seats short of winning his party's biggest ever majority. Quite extraordinary times, but that shows how, I think, the last 6 Prime Ministers, none of them have seen a full term, and that shows how chaotic British politics is.
Now, James, 4.5 million people being denied their right to vote at this year's local elections, with 29 local councils having their elections postponed. The government I would say, cancelled, obviously, shock horror. In Labour-led Stoke-on-Trent, James, they refused to vote to say that they would even definitely hold them in 2027. This pattern is seeming to emerge. It's becoming quite worrying indeed. I mean, we know that Reform UK have launched a legal challenge due to be heard towards the end of February, albeit their press conference to announce that got overshadowed by a certain defection of Robert Jenrick. What's the spectators' view on this? Is it that do you think there is enough public outrage about this? I mean, I for one don't think it will cost Labour the general election, but I don't think it saves these councillors or does any good for the Labour Party brand that they look like they're running frit from the electorate.
Yeah, I certainly think it should be a potentially potent weapon for Reform to use, and obviously I think it does actually help. In some ways, Reform's kind of dance. They're seen as this new untried party, etc., maybe with some authoritarian links, etc. But of course, they can come back and just point out that, hang on a sec, look at what Labour's doing in government. I'm fairly cynical about this. I don't think that it's going to do much to publicly cut through. I've not seen any evidence of that. I think it'll energise Reform activists. I think it'll help their messaging. But in the wider public, I'm not sure there'll be a backlash. I don't think there'll be a political penalty for this, rightly or wrongly. And you know what? If I was in one of these areas, I probably would be doing the cynical but wrong thing to do, which would be cancelling these elections, because the whole point of what the Labour and Conservatives need to do is play for time, hope something happens to trip up Nigel Farage, try and save as many of their people, keep the resources, frame it as the two big parties, and so why on earth would they give Reform a gift on a political platter by letting them kind of slaughter them all in May? So I think they are going to try and cancel some of these for as long as possible. They can talk about local government restructuring, but right now I'll make the point, Jonathan, if it is going to be local government restructuring, how much that is going to get past the Labour backbenchers, and of course, more interestingly perhaps, is that system of council tax reform. Council tax hasn't been changed since it was introduced in 1991. There was some talk that Rayner wanted to do that when she was in government. Now she's gone. I suspect that effort, there'll be too many vested interests against it.
Well, this is interesting, James, and I think the problem I've got is that Labour are not being consistent. So if you take Staffordshire, where I obviously live, right, Cannock Chase and Tamworth, both Labour-led, were due to have elections for, I think, a third of each of their councillors. They've had theirs cancelled. But the all-out elections in Newcastle Underline Borough, Conservative-led, are going ahead. So it's hard to say that local government reorganisation is a factor when you've got 2 local authorities cancelling and 1 going ahead, and then you've got a city council refusing to say whether they want them to go ahead or not in the following May. I just think it sends a mixed message. But I agree with you. I think it plays to the base, I would suggest, but that's not a bad thing. Reform UK want to keep that surge, and it's that surge I'm interested in, James, because John Curtis has come out, and I think we're all scared to disagree with him, but he has decided to say, and on this side, by the way, I do disagree with him, that Reform UK has peaked. He thinks the 32% average mark that was hit in September last year is at the best they can do. To be fair, he cites his logic for being that Reform UK is only ever going to predominantly pick up voters who backed Leave, and they're never going to be able to win over enough of that Remain vote, or even any of it, he thinks. So therefore, with Brexit becoming more and more unpopular, you're playing to a smaller and smaller audience. He does point out the Conservatives have improved, but they're still at 19%, well below where they even got in that disastrous set of elections in July 2024. There's still people like me sacked from office, rightfully, as I would argue, over that disgraceful record and time in government, particularly when it came to migration. And he says, look, we have to accept for a year to 2 years, Tory and Reform are going to battle it to the death of who is the only party that will survive on the centre-right, and then let's see what happens if the polls haven't dramatically shifted either way for any of them, because he goes, otherwise you are probably leaving a way open for a progressive left coalition to come through. But do people in Reform buy this? Do they think that they've peaked at this moment in time, or do they think that there's a lot of don't knows that aren't being counted, or indeed people that they can tap into?
No, Reform strategists think they can get to 40%. I suppose the interesting thing, Jonathan, is that you can say about the vote peaking at 32%. First of all, the obvious point is that Keir Starmer just won a fantastic general election victory with 32.7% of the vote. So 32% in a system where everyone else is polling 18% basically gives you a hands down landslide victory. So that's the first obvious point. The second point is that yes, he may have a sort of peak in terms of people will be turned off by it, but it also gives you a really stubbornly high coalition, which the likes of the Conservatives can't tap into. The Conservatives are struggling to say, look, their argument is Kemi Badenoch is a much more palatable person. That may be true, but if they have a really loyal Reform bloc, ultimately, when it comes to the election, people in Reform think that some of those Tories will be very pragmatic about this and say, well, look, I don't love Nigel, but it's only going to be him or Keir Starmer, and frame it as a two-horse contest. So they reckon that it'll be much more of a left-right bloc, and that actually a lot of Tories will be quite tactical and sensible, a bit like those UKIPers and Brexit Party were back in 2019 when they lent their votes to Boris Johnson.
I think you're right, James. We always talk about tactical voting on the progressive left, actually. That does therefore mean that logic should apply that on the right that will happen too. And I think you're correct in saying that voters are aware in parts of the Red Wall it's becoming increasingly clear it's a fight between Labour and Reform for those seats in England, just like in certain shire seats, maybe the South West in particular, it's more of a Lib Dem versus Conservative kind of fight, albeit obviously Reform did win an extraordinary amount of councillors in Cornwall. It's going to be a fascinating thing. Thank you, Mr. James Hill, for joining us. Deputy Political Editor there of The Spectator, a good friend of ours here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. We will go for a short break. I will see you in a bit. You take care. Oh, we're still on. Don't you worry.
I have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America.
That is why I said the use of tariffs against allies is completely wrong.
The fact that they had a boat land there 500 years ago doesn't mean that they own the land. We're not going to have Russia or China occupy Greenland. So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult way.
Any decision about the future status of Greenland belongs to the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jonathan Gullis here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. We're going to go and hear from you, the people, and you can help add your voice to that by 0344 499 1000. Type that in your phone on WhatsApp, and you can voice note us and WhatsApp us, or you can call us. You can text the word Talk to 87222 with Talk at the start of your message, and you can message and follow us on X at talkTV. Let's go to our first caller. Her name is Grace. She's in London, and she has some views on Donald Trump's comments. Hello there, Grace.
Hi. I'm afraid I don't know at all enough about the military, but I have so much respect for what these amazing people have done, and it is incredibly offensive that Trump would make these comments. And it kind of reminded me of when I was in school and I was bullied, and I was told, what bullies say is not truth, and you need to just disregard their words because their words are just not truth. But they can still be hurtful, and I'm worried that people could be hurt by what he said, but his words should be disregarded. And it's particularly ironic given that obviously he avoided being in the war effort himself in Vietnam. And I think about the fact that he's tried to kind of suck up to Christian voters in America. And the most important thing about Christianity is that Jesus sacrificed himself for us. And he told us to be willing to sacrifice for others. And Trump does not do that. Some of our brave troops did that. And the fact that Trump would just disregard their incredible sacrifice for the cause of liberty is just horrifying, and I hope that people aren't too hurt by his awful words, but I worry that they could be.
No, absolutely. Look, as I say, I remember the town of Stratford-upon-Avon falling into shock when Private Conrad Lewis, someone who I knew and regularly saw out and about in the town growing up, lost his life in Afghanistan serving king and country alongside, as you say, American forces. I remember having constituents of mine in Stoke-on-Trent North, or former constituents, should I say, who lost their loved ones in Iraq, in some cases through friendly fire and involving the Americans. And that comment, I think, you hit the nail on the head there, Grace, is the comment from President Trump is disgusting and repugnant. We all remember the images on our news of those 457 brave armed forces personnel coming off the back of those carrier planes in coffins with the Union flag draped over them, and the sadness that it brought the town. And of course, we know many veterans, I'm sure you do too, and we see who have suffered from severe PTSD or indeed physical injuries who served in those conflicts as well. And I think it is a grave insult, and I think President Trump, look, there's some things on Chagos I can agree with him on, but, we've got to be clear here. Those comments are vile and disgusting, and that he should apologise immediately. Otherwise, we should, in my opinion, be talking about whether or not the king does go over to America, because the king, at the end of the day, is our head of our military.
Absolutely. And ultimately, Trump is very self-serving. I think that the reason he says things like this is to try and cozy up to his own voters. He's trying to say to his own voters, our country is vastly superior in bravery to all other countries. We know it's superior in might, obviously, because it's bigger, it's got more power. But he's trying to also say to his voters, you guys, you American people, you're better than everyone else. And he's hoping that by doing things like that, he can win more votes for himself. And he can make himself look bigger and more powerful by saying that his nation is so superior to the rest of humanity. So it's selfishness, it's self-serving, and it should remind people also that a lot of what he says is detached from reality. Not all of it all the time, but quite a lot of it should just not be taken seriously because he doesn't speak the truth.
Thank you so much there, Grace, for your call. We really appreciate Grace there from London on Trump's comments. We've got Simon in Ringwood who wants to talk about migration. Hello, Simon, how are you?
All right, Jonathan, good to talk to you. What it was about specifically the recent case in Bournemouth with that guy, in inverted commas, being sent down for 7 years.
Yes.
I live in Bournemouth. Actually, I live in Southbourne, which is about 2 miles east of Bournemouth city centre, and you could not get a bigger contrast. I was in Bournemouth 2 Saturdays ago for dinner with the wife and my 13-year-old daughter, and coming out of a central located restaurant at about 8 or 9 o'clock with a woman and a 13-year-old daughter, stared at by men milling around. It's sinister. I'm so surprised at the lack of outrage at any of these convictions when they reach the courts. Tom Hayes, the local MP, Bournemouth is regenerating, Bournemouth is great. It's not. You need to go there and see this yourself. It's not a place you want to be out, if certainly you're a female. I just don't know what's going on. Well, I do. I just don't know if it's ever going to end.
Well, look, Simon, thank you for that call. Simon there in Ringwood talking about the reality on the ground of having undocumented fighting-age men on our streets, in our hotels, endangering our women and girls, and that we should all be scared about it. If you want to carry on taking part and sharing your views, 0344 499 1000 is how you WhatsApp us, voice note us and call us. 87222 is how you text us with the word talk at the start of your message. And, of course, you can message us and follow us on X at talkTV. After the break, I'm joined by Liam Halligan discussing the current state of the UK economy. I don't suspect we're going to have lots of positive to say, but you never know. Tune in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. We're getting near towards the end of the show, but we've still got plenty more to go, so make sure you keep tuning in to the great home of common sense. That is Talk with me, Jonathan Gullis, and I'm delighted that we'll be joined next by Mr. Liam Halligan. He is an economist. He is also a columnist at the Telegraph, and he's an author of When the Facts Change on his Substack. I am a huge fan. I've always loved talking to Liam. How are you, sir?
Very well, nice to see you, Jonathan.
Well, good to see you too. Now, Liam, I really find you refreshing because I always like the way that you have a dry, sarcastic humour about the current state of the UK economy. And now we've had Tom Kerridge, who ironically signed letters saying vote Labour, and is now obviously very upset that since voting Labour that they're killing his pub. Now we've got Gordon Ramsay, who's not one for mincing his words. He has said the industry is facing a bloodbath. I've never seen it so bad. When I look ahead to April, when the budget measures come in, I think those of us in hospitality are lambs to the slaughter. What's happening to pubs is madness. There was already one shutting every day before these proposed rises in business rates and taxes. They're being crippled. I mean, Liam, does this surprise you? How bad is it? How much do the public know just how damaging the hospitality sector, restaurants and pubs are about to be clobbered by this Chancellor?
Well, ordinarily, Jonathan, you'll know as a former government minister, the idea of business rates is a kind of humdrum backwater of economic policy. What are business rates? Business rates are taxes placed on businesses that have physical premises, even if they don't own the premises, based on the so-called, rateable, or if you like, rental value of those businesses. So shops pay business rates, pubs pay business rates, hotels and restaurants pay business rates, warehouses pay business rates, and so on. Of course, the online giants, when they sell over the web, they don't pay business rates on their premises. So high business rates is one reason why a lot of our high streets in British towns and even big cities, even in the southeast, are often hollowed out because the high-tech online retail giants don't have those same business costs. And the thing about business rates, Jonathan, is that you're liable for business rates not only as a business before you've made any profit, but even before you've taken any revenue in at all. You have this massive tax bill that you must meet, and it's very, very onerous. And I thought the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, was pretty disingenuous, as I'm afraid she quite often is. In her last budget statement, she says, business rates are coming down. But the rate at which business rates are charged may have been coming down, but the valuations placed on businesses went up enormously. And as some of the reliefs that were given to business rates during COVID to help businesses get through have been completely withdrawn, a lot of businesses, particularly in the retail and hospitality sector. The hospitality sector, of course, very labour intensive. The cost of employing people's gone up a lot. minimum wage increases, particularly for the young, employer national insurance increases. So these service industries, these retailers, and particularly the pubs and the restaurants, which are very labour intensive, you need lots of staff, their costs have just gone absolutely through the roof. Plus their energy bills have gone through the roof. You know, business utility costs, absolutely crazy increases. So I think for a lot of high street retailers, and particularly a lot of high street hotels and restaurants and pubs, this business rate increase, which for, you know, a small pub can amount to, you know, 20, 30, 40 grand extra a year. Well, for many businesses, that's what the main person running the business earns for you know, working, you know, 80, 100-hour weeks, keeping their business going. So this business rate increase is really, really harming a lot of firms, particularly a lot of service sector firms, particularly a lot of restaurants, hotels and pubs. Now, it seems after a big campaign, particularly by my newspaper, The Telegraph, Reeves is going to give some kind of reprieve to pubs, because so many publicans have literally banned their local Labour MPs from pubs. And it is a massive issue. You know, I grew up in pubs. A lot of my family are publicans, came over from Ireland, ran pubs. You know, my old man ran his small business basically from a bar stool in a pub, a small building business. I know how important pubs are, not necessarily to the bien pensant, you know, flashy media class. They go for wine bars and dinner parties. But many ordinary people across the UK, the pub, it's a place of doing business. It's a social support mechanism. It's, you know, we talk about mental health. Without your local, a lot of people will be lost. And I think Labour has really had to bite the bullet here, smell the coffee, if you like. A lot of pubs do coffee these days, of course. And they've given pubs some kind of reprieve. No wonder the likes of Gordon Ramsay, Tom Kerridge, and restaurant owners, hoteliers across the country are feeling really peeved, because the pubs seem to have got some kind of a reprieve, but not the hotels, not the restaurateurs, and not other businesses with premises. They're going to be paying, in many cases, much higher business rates.
Well, Liam, this is the problem, isn't it? Because, as you say, some research published by the Conservative Party has suggested between 2024 and 2025 to 2028, 2029, some of these pubs, for example, would see a 317% increase in their business rate. Some hotels at 398%. I mean, this is truly shocking stuff. As you say, tens of thousands in many cases, where for, you know, pubs, they're talking about having to sell an extra 100,000, 150,000 pints in order just to cover
and people
the
aren't
additional
going to
cost.
pay 8, 9, 10 quid for a pint. They're just not going to do it. They just won't go to the pub.
Exactly.
They'll go to the supermarket and get some cheap beer from a supermarket and sit at home and watch the telly. And what will we have lost? And a lot of those pubs will then be, you know, given over to the developers for luxury flats, and whole communities will become husks of what they previously were. Look, this is what happens when you have a state that's so overbearing, where the tax burden is already at a 70-year high. And it seems that Labour's ideology is to ever expand the state. The answer to all the country's problems is always more government, more tax, more state. And clearly it isn't. Big parts of our economy cannot be taxed anymore, or they will disappear. And that is happening in every town in the UK on our high street.
The Telegraph, as you say, has done great work on making sure there's going to be this U-turn or partial U-turn. I think we're waiting for the detail, Liam, from the Chancellor for pubs. But as you rightly point out, how are hotels and restaurants, and if I look at places like Stoke-on-Trent, it's already hard to get that kind of local economy thriving once again, because people are being squeezed in their own pockets. They haven't got the disposable income that they used to have. If you know, for hotels in particular in places like Stoke, where you're desperately trying to interest a corporate kind of group, or, you know, use the sort of tourist attractions, you know, Wedgwood, for example, and Potteries Museum and Art Gallery with the Spitfire on display there. But, you know, by racking those up, like you say, all you're going to do is squeeze out anyone wanting to go on holiday and vacate within the UK. And that has then that extra knock-on effect, particularly in those touristy destinations in places like the Cotswold, the Peak District, but also those many seaside towns that are already being clobbered to death over the years.
You know, there aren't that many aspects of the UK economy that are world-class these days. I think we can come back. I'm an optimistic person. I think a lot of the policies we've seen, frankly, from both main parties over the last 10 to 15 to 20 years have been deeply counterproductive. But one area where we are really good is the service sector, in particular tourism. We're a very, very visited country. You know, you talk about Stoke-on-Trent, where I obviously used to be the MP. There's so much to see around Staffordshire. You know, it's such an interesting place, not necessarily with huge respect the most fashionable part of the country, but for many people, you know, whether they're elsewhere in the UK or from overseas, seeing parts of the UK, you know, local hotels, used for businesses, used for tourism, they're very, very, very important. They're big local employers. They give a lot of families those little part-time jobs that make the difference, that mean families can keep their standards of living up to a decent standard. And if these little businesses are absolutely hammered by the slab tax, which is business rates, you know, you've got a business, you haven't taken in a single pound this year, you obviously haven't made any profit, but you are still liable for this massive expense on top of the rent that you pay for your premises, on top of everything else that you have to pay, on top of the extra costs of employing people through a much higher minimum wage, much higher employer national insurance, Labour's Employment Rights Bill, which takes us back to the 70s, massively increasing the cost of employment. You know, I tell you what, Jonathan, I was a young political correspondent back in the mid and late 90s when Tony Blair launched New Labour. I knew all the New Labour front bench. They were well different from Starmer's front bench, not least because they weren't as ideologically left-wing as Starmer's front bench, but some of them actually knew about business and had run businesses and had launched, formed, grown and sold businesses. They'd made payroll. There is no one on the Labour front bench that has any idea of what it takes to run a business. Not a single person, and there's no one in Downing Street either who has a feel for business, and it shows.
Liam Halligan, an amazing columnist and it's columnist at The Telegraph. Thank you so much for joining us here and sharing us your views. Always a pleasure to hear them, and we need to hear them because, blimey, are things looking glum? Well, let us know what you think. Have Labour killed the pubs, the hotels, the restaurants and the shops in your communities? How bad is it already? And do you fear it's about to get a whole lot worse? 0344 499 1000. That's how you can call us, WhatsApp us and voice note us. 87222 is how you text us with the word talk at the start of your message. And of course, you can message us and follow us on X at talkTV. We'll see you after the break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me every weekend from 6 a.m. for the stories that matter to you. We talk politics, we talk news, we talk entertainment, we talk about everything that affects your life. There's only one place to start your weekend, the home of common sense. Talk Breakfast on Talk. 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every Friday, Saturday and Sunday here on the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Good afternoon. It's delighted to be with you here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk, heading in to the final segment before the great Ian Collins takes over and takes us through from 1 till 4 today. We go to our next guest on a great little story that often can easily overlooked. There we go, finally got the words out of my mouth. Mr. David Bean's joining us. He's Parliament and Government Relations Officer from the Countryside Alliance. Hello, David, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Jonathan. Good afternoon to you.
No, well, thank you very much for joining us. Now, I'm fascinated by this because it's the type of thing that drives people potty in the potteries when it comes to the state of legal dumping sites. And the BBC has found more than 700 legal tips were shut down in 2024-25, but data released by the Environment Agency has revealed some 517 dumps were still active at the end of last year. Among the largest sites that have yet to be cleared up are 280,000-tonne site in Cheshire, two 50,000-tonne sites in Lancashire and Cornwall, and a 36,000-tonne tip in Kent. Just how bad is this issue?
It's a terrible thing, Jonathan, and I think it's something that you will know very well from your days representing Stoke-on-Trent in Parliament. I know that this is something that you've spoken about in Parliament, and in fact the parliamentary debates have been continuing up until almost now. Very recently, at the end of last year, there was an awful lot of attention paid to the horrendous incident at the banks of the River Cherwell in Oxford. The scale of the dumping in that case was some 20,000 tonnes, as we're given to understand. And yet, as the BBC's report has found, the largest incident in England, the one up in Northwich in Cheshire, was some 280,000 tonnes, mostly in that case of soil. So you can just tell that right across the country, right across England in particular, these incidents of illegal dumping are going on everywhere, and they are blighting communities, and they are blighting our environment too.
Out of interest, David, how do you think we need to tackle this issue? Is it an education position? Is it about how enforcement? Is it about, things like cameras, for example, but also just having more people going around enforcing, whether that be beefing up the Environment Agency or indeed local councils hiring more people? I mean, just how do we tackle this? Because it is blighting communities, whether you live in your urban cities, the fly tipping down alleyways in Stoke-on-Trent. As you say, we had that illegal waste being taken to Wally's Quarry over in Newcastle under Lyme Silverdale. And then, of course, in beautiful rural Oxfordshire, I remember that image when it was first on our screen of the banks and the dreadful scenes that came from it. But how do you tackle it?
It is such a multifaceted and complicated issue that there are many different things that need to be done right across the whole picture, really. The easy answer that a lot of people will immediately reach for is we need tougher penalties. And there is an element of that, certainly. But the problem is, you can have the toughest penalties in the world that you want, but it doesn't actually matter if the crime's never been being detected and the criminals aren't being brought up to justice. Doesn't matter what penalty you would in theory impose on them if you never catch them in the first place. So clearly the ability of the enforcement agencies to tackle the issue needs to be looked at very closely. But then we go into the wider story about the whole patchwork of enforcement agencies that exist on this. Some instances of fly tipping, going down to the less serious but still obviously troublesome aspects of littering, are the responsibility of the local authority. And yet when you hit a certain threshold in terms of either size or environmental damage, it then becomes the responsibility of the Environment Agency. And the difficulty is that nobody's entirely clear for a given incident who it is that they should be reporting to and who it is who's responsible for doing something about it. In the parliamentary debate on the Cherwell incident in December, even the minister herself, Angela Eagle, admitted in terms that she would not know for any given fly tipping incident which is the body that would be responsible for dealing with it. And so if she was just a member of the public coming across it, then she wouldn't know where to report it. And this, we're talking about the government's own waste minister. So if someone even in that position and with that degree of expertise wouldn't know for a given case who it is they're supposed to be raising it with, then that tells you something about the patchwork of monitoring and enforcement that's going on. And so that's why one of the things the Countryside Alliance has been arguing for many years is that we need, for waste crime, a single, well-known, well-understood reporting body that will take reports of incidents of any size. And if necessary, yes, they might have to forward it to another agency, but they will take the details, they'll record it, and they will be responsible for making sure that it's dealt with on the initial stage. My idea is that, you know, the 101 non-emergency police number is very well understood for a range of emergencies. So perhaps that should be the initial reporting line. Because the fact is, if the authorities don't know about an incident, or if rather the relevant part of the authorities, since, you know, as you will know, Jonathan, it is very much a patchwork, the authorities aren't a monolithic entity. If the relevant part doesn't know about it, then they're not going to be in a position to even start.
Absolutely. Well, David Bean there, Parliament Government Relations Manager there at Countryside Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us. And what an interesting story to end on. But we're still here to take your calls, and I want to get them. But before I do that, I'm going to quickly read a few texts. John in Telford has texted in. He's ex-armed forces and proud. Thank you for your service, John. As an armed forces veteran who served in Afghanistan for 2 tours, I find Trump's comments downright disrespectful to not only us veterans, but also our comrades who were not so lucky as us that survived. Tell me, Mr. Trump, did I dream about serving on the front line? Because if I did, then why do I feel that I did and saw a lot? Retract your comments, or are you hoping to rewrite the war in Afghanistan by saying only the US forces serve there? This is in relation to President Trump saying that UK and other NATO allies were sitting back from the front line in Afghanistan, when we obviously know 457 armed forces personnel lost their lives, as well as many hundreds who were injured or suffer from things like PTSD. Another one here. Jonathan, Trump has form for insulting the military, including his own, by stating that anyone who signs on the dotted line is a sucker. Don't forget he exempted himself from the Vietnam draft due to a problem with his feet. Very convenient. That's from Barry. Claire from Swindon's text in. Have you noticed that Labour always announce a potential U-turn when they are in the mire over other issues, such as the migrants being placed in army barracks? They are hated as a political party due to their utter contempt of the British public. Well, let's go to Johnny. He's in Market Harborough in Leicestershire, and he has some views on Donald Trump's comments. Hello there, Johnny.
Hello, Jonathan. Thank you for taking my call.
No, thank you. Are you a veteran, sir, by the way?
I am. I did, my theatre of war was Northern Ireland. I did 7 tours.
Can I say thank you for your service before we go into your call? I think it's always important that we say that to people like yourselves who are brave enough.
You're welcome. And, you know, it was my service was the greatest time, you know, of my life. I thoroughly enjoyed it and was very sad when I left it upon reflection. However, I was particularly touched on you two talk, but that you mentioned Conrad Lewis. I'm friends with the family of Conrad, and I just think, how dare Trump desecrate such memories and that people have, and such bravery, bearing in mind that Conrad went in to retrieve a body of a fallen soldier. Where, you know, and it's just, and what about all these Chinook pilots and medics on board that took out, that saved all the American troops and all our troops? You know, it's just disgusting. You know, my unit was there front line. I wasn't. I was out by then. But it just, every year, you know, we march at the cenotaph, and with such pride, and how dare he just destroy. You know, these guys and girls, they were just are immense people. Our veterans, our homeless veterans. I mean, you just don't get me going. I just wanted to say.
And Johnny, I knew Conrad in the sense of Stratford-upon-Avon is not a big town, right? And so I'd see him out and about in local parks. When we were 16, you can imagine we were sneaking into local pubs and clubs, claiming to be 18 years old. And obviously, when we were legally allowed to go to clubs, see him there too. And I just remember people that who were very close to him, you know, friends of his, and people that I therefore knew as well through whether I played rugby with them at Stratford-on-Avon Rugby Club or wherever. I remember the tears and the pain in their eyes, and I remember welling up myself, because I never thought in my lifetime I would ever know someone, no matter how well I knew them. And obviously Conrad, it was we weren't personal friends, but we knew of each other. You know, I would never thought in my lifetime I would ever be witness to someone who would lose their life serving in the armed forces. I thought that was all behind us, that kind of, you know, I was naive because we were living in peacetime, and to see the photos of his family and to see the streets of Stratford-upon-Avon lined for when his coffin came through, still to this day sits with me, and I'll never forget it. And as you say, my grandfather served in Suez. My great-grandfather was served as well. My great-great uncle recently passed away, who was a D-Day veteran, you know, about a year ago, and served on, served in the front line there. And I just think it's angered me, because it's such a lazy comment to make. And I'm willing to forgive, but there has to be an apology, and it has to come quick.
Well, it is true, and I think also the way on his speech in Davos, and he went, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's World War II, we won that." No, he didn't. The Air Force, the daylight bombing, they were such brave, wonderful soldiers, but everybody else did their part. And how dare you, to make out that it was America? It was, it just has an idea and just speaks off. I used to respect him until this moment, and I'm very, very, very sensitive about how veterans are seen, talked about, and thought, and it's also, and the schools don't encourage kids to join the forces, and it's just so sad. I had the best years of my life, and I saw a lot of things that maybe that were horrendous, but it's just I don't know. I think he needs to retract it. He needs to do something, because I think he's done himself such a dishonour by saying such rubbish. But anyway, thank you so much for voicing that. As I say, only this week I turned on to talk, and I won't be changing it. Thank you.
I'm delighted to have you on. And Johnny, please pass on my best wishes and thoughts to Conrad's family, and thank you for joining us on this station and calling in too. We're delighted to have you on. And then finally, I couldn't do a show without hearing from her. Her name is Georgina. She's from London. Oh, she sadly just dropped off. Oh, dear. I love you, Georgina, and I'm sure we'll get you back on another time. But let's quickly read out some texts before I hand over to Mr. Ian Collins. We've got Michael here's text in. Migrants located in traditional UK holiday destinations have decimated those local communities and made them unattractive choices for vacations, as will moving home to any of these nice country locations that could end up with hundreds and thousands of illegal migrants being housed locally. Another one here from Chris in Northumberland. Jonathan, let's think through the 4-day week in a different way. We could offer 4-day and 3-day week contracts, develop the workforce to have more people in work, but have 7 days of productivity by job sharing. Pay would never need to be adjusted, but that's the only way I could think of it being positive. An interesting spin there on the 4-day working week. Another one here. While some allies, Germany, Italy, Turkey, Spain, had national caveats restricting combat roles, geography or offensive ops in certain phases, this did not apply broadly to all NATO troops, especially not the UK, Canada, Denmark or others in southern and eastern hotspots. I think in his ham-fisted way made a blanket statement about NATO in general. Wait for further statement to clarify his comments regarding President Trump. I'm delighted that we'll be soon handing over to a great friend of mine, a great host of his show, Mr. Ian Collins. Hello, sir, how are you?
Jonathan, I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. I've had an amazing reaction, actually. Obviously, the migration situation with this army barracks, I think there has to be some give. If we want to end using hotels, we have to use them. But the problem is they're not being detained. And even one caller into Mark Dolan's show said he saw people queuing up for the train for a day trip in London. And then, on the other hand, President Trump's vile comments about suggesting that British armed forces were not on the front line
that's an
in
extraordinary
Afghanistan.
thing. Why does he have to go there? Why does he have to spoil what was a good week for him?
I know.
It seems incredible that he would go there. And, of course, you can look at Iraq as well as Afghanistan if you want to look at allied forces. I mean, I don't think this country could have been more squarely
457
alongside.
Coffins we saw come off the back of military
and then, of course, all the
planes.
soldiers that were injured as well, life-changing injuries, that's in the hundreds, if not the thousands. So, I mean, the figures are absolutely huge on that one. I don't know where he was going with that.
I hope he apologises quickly, because like you say, America's an important ally, but that was just beyond the pale.
Completely. However, all of these problems are going to be solved in the world because Andy Burnham will be the Prime Minister